Good evening, everyone. We would like to call our March 6th Fayetteville City Council work session to order. Thank you all who are joining us in the audience and those who are joining us remote. At this time, we will have the invocation, if we could please stand for that. Councilmember Thompson, you in a praying mood tonight?
I'm always in a praying mood, Mr.
All
Mayor.
right, so if you could lead us in prayer, and then following which we'll repeat the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray, dear Lord. Here we are, dear Lord, your servants, and you are our guides. Here it is, dear Lord, that we are the sheep, and you are the shepherd. Here we are, dear Lord, we are the clay, and you are the potter. Dear Lord, this day is every day. I pray that you will continuously guide us, direct us, lead us. Strengthen us, encourage us, dear Lord. Help us along the way, dear Lord. Be that faithful servant that we know you are, who can do exceedingly abundantly above all we can ask or think. Move in this place, dear Lord. Have your way in this place, dear Lord. We pray for everyone under the sound of my voice, everyone in this room, our staff, our council, our mayor. Let the proceedings of the night go forward, Heavenly Lord. Let it be your will, not our will, be done. We ask these things in your Son, Jesus' name, dear Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Councilmember Thompson. All right, Council, moving on to the approval of the agenda. Council, there's one item as we approve this at the conclusion. Asked if we could consider a motion to suspend the rules after 5.07 just for that particular item, or if we can move that item to last. The sales tax agreement needs to be signed and executed and submitted to the county before our next meeting will occur. So all of the other municipalities are doing it. I think they had scheduled meetings, and so ask that for your consideration so that we could get the proposed sales tax.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda and move. We don't necessarily have to move that, and we could just suspend the rules when we get to it. Correct? Okay. To approve the agenda.
Thank you, Councilmember Ingram. There's a motion to approve. Madam Attorney, just had a quick question. If we suspend the rules for that item, are they then suspended for the subsequent items?
No, sir. You
Okay.
just make the motion to suspend for that
Particular item. Thank you. All right, there's a motion by Councilmember Ingram. Seconded. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Hondros. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Jennifer, we got our iPads up. Let's try it. All right, we'll do show of hands on this one, guys. Okay, here we go. All right. Did y'all see it on your iPad? Okay. All right. Motion carries 8-0. Who didn't vote? Yeah, but that should be 9-0. Did you get votes from everyone? Well, he did it. So, Madam Clerk, it's 9-0. He voted with the hand. All right. Motion carries. Item 5.01, Merchant Choice Planning Grant. I see Ms. Weeks. I see Mr. Cawley and others. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Chris Cawley, Economic Community Development Director. I'm going to apologize in advance. Y'all going to see me quite a bit tonight. So we'll try to go through this. Before I start, though, last week we had an incredibly successful meeting that I believe Councilmember Hare called and filled this room to talk about Merchant Choice and all the progress that we've had here. And that felt good to talk to folks and also to see folks that I knew their names in the crowd. And so we're going to go through what we've done in the past 2 years, but that's what we did in the past 2 years. We got to know folks in the community and understand what they wanted and what they saw for the future. So just to remind everybody, in December of 2020, the city and the Housing Authority and the Housing Authority Director, Ms. Weeks, is back here supporting along with her consultant, Mr. Ed Cito. We applied for a grant, and we were one of 11 in the country that won a grant for $450,000 to do a 2-year planning process, and the outcome of that process was a transformation plan. clear direction from council was to do that transformation plan with a commitment to engaging the community in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The goals of that transformation plan are threefold: to focus on the housing in the neighborhood, the actual neighborhood itself, and the people that work and live there. So first thing we did was talk to the community about what their visions for the future were. And you can see on this word cloud some of the things that popped up as key terms: thriving, vibrant, prosperous, flourishing, hope. But we had kind of three key themes that came out of that. First off was a community of learning. When you've got resources like Fayetteville State University and E.E. Smith in the neighborhood, you can't not talk about learning and growth and what you have there. The second theme was growing green, and that was about parks and open spaces and trails, but it was also about growing green like money. And we talked about generating wealth and business and home ownership, and how those programs and the city and public partners could partner with the community to make that a reality. And last but not least was the historical and cultural context of the community. When you've got a historic black college and university, the starting point of the civil rights movement in Fayetteville, strong churches, the history and the culture of this community could not be last. It had to be put forth as a major theme in what we planned. So part of the money that we got from the Choice Neighborhood Planning Grant, we could set aside some of it to do early action projects. And so the first one that we did was 19 Little Free Libraries, which effectively doubled the number of libraries that we had in the city of Fayetteville, and we installed them all in the Merchant Choice neighborhood. We also allocated a significant portion of that money to support a community garden project, which was being led by a local nonprofit with not a lot of resources. And so we were able to put some real money behind that effort so that they were able to get supplies. You got a big pile of dirt right here because that's a lot of what it takes to grow stuff. And we were able to buy rocks and soil and equipment to make that a reality. And then last but not least, we're currently finishing up a public Wi-Fi infrastructure project at Murchison Townhomes. So if y'all remember during the pandemic, the school buses had to go out to some neighborhoods and park and put a Wi-Fi broadcaster out so kids could connect for school and do their homework. And so through this project and through this grant and partnership with the Housing Authority, who's going to pay the bill, we've been able to provide public Wi-Fi at Murchison Townhomes, and hopefully that'll go online in the next month. Our IT department was indispensable in helping us navigate all the equipment and technology and things like that. So we talked about this plan being divided into three parts: the housing, people, and neighborhoods. And starting with the neighborhood piece, really needed to build additional housing, especially senior housing that's affordable. The city can look to assist the private sector in establishing or recruiting a grocery store into the neighborhood. There's several other items on here. I'm not going to read through all of them, but a couple of things that popped out that we're going to talk about towards the end is promote MLK Park and create trail connections, expand community gardens, which we just said we did with this money, establish community cleanup and placemaking improvements, create designated historic districts. And so the city applied for and won a grant from the State Historic Preservation Office to do a historic survey of the Broadale community. And we just awarded a contract for an historic architectural survey to be done in that community to identify the historic importance of it and preserve it. The people element really talked about free or low-cost mental health services, a youth and teen enrichment center. We all know gun violence is sweeping the nation, and a lot of that starts with teenagers and young men. Creating tutoring programs with local resources like E.E. Smith and Fayetteville State University in the community. Improve promotion of business and incentives for businesses, expand childcare, enhance neighborhood watch. And a lot of these things we've done, right? We had a presentation maybe a month ago about how to start a community watch group. Council allocated American Rescue Plan funds for childcare recruitment and retention bonuses so that we can have professional folks watching our kids while our folks go to work. Now, onto the housing piece, our professional team looked at 7 different sites throughout the area. And there's still a lot of potential in this neighborhood. But the Housing Authority, our planners and experts, and our team decided to focus on the Murchison Townhouse site where the existing public housing property. And that would be phase one, would be redevelopment of that. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in just a second. And then through our getting to know the neighborhood, we got to know this little nonprofit that operates a big property on Elliott Circle. And so as we looked at that property and talked to that nonprofit about how much they struggled over the years and the service that they provide on a shoestring budget, we decided that was going to be our second target housing site. And so that would be phase 2 and 3 of the redevelopment. We also hired an economist to look at a market study of the entire neighborhood. And the economist came back and said, by 2027, you're looking at 240 to 440 additional affordable and market rate rental units that are needed to support the population growth here, and 60 for-sale homes. And so this goes towards council's goals of providing for affordable housing, but also creating those opportunities for home ownership and wealth building. So looking at those sites a little bit more in detail, starting with Murchison Townhouses. The site right now has 55 units on it. It's older. It doesn't have a really functional community space, and it's real spread out. And so what our planners were able to do is use that existing footprint to program out 115 units and a community space. That was something that was really important to the housing authority. Is any of us that have ever lived into an apartment, you've got, exercise rooms and a meeting space for folks. And so we want to make sure we do that with our affordable developments as well. So we looked at a mix here of garden style apartments, those kind of like 3-story type buildings, and then senior apartments, and then have the townhouse and duplex units. And the idea is to kind of blend the neighborhood together into a bunch of different housing types. On the Elliott Circle property, it's a huge piece of property surrounded by a single family neighborhood. And so right now it has 110 units. About 90 of those are actually occupied and able to be occupied. And they don't have a community amenity space either. And so when we programmed this out, we made sure to put a space for the community to gather and meet. But also we wanted to blend a lot of different housing types into this area. So we started with garden style apartments, and then we added some townhouses and duplexes. And then all the yellow you see in there would be single family lots for sale. The idea here is to blend this development into the neighborhood at large so that people in the neighborhood can enjoy the amenities as well as the residents. So on to the most important thing here is the next steps, right? So we've done this for 2 years. We've been successful at getting feedback from the community and following all of HUD's guidelines and rules. And so the planning grant is coming to an end, and we'll be ready to submit this transformation plan, which contains everything we just went over. And that transformation plan becomes the foundation of an implementation grant. So HUD has their own timelines, but we expect for that grant to be open in early 2024. The grants can be up to $50 million. That was a recent change where they upped it. But for our community, what we're looking at is really somewhere between $30 and $35 million. Now, about 20 communities apply for these grants annually, and 3 to 4 get awarded. So we have to be extremely competitive, and we have to be on our A game. So the city and the housing authority will need a professional firm who knows these grants inside and out to help us navigate that application process so that we put our best foot forward. The most competitive communities show continual progress towards realizing that transformation plan, and they're the ones who get the implementation grant. The awesome thing about what we've done here in the past couple of years is we've put several of these projects in place with currently appropriated money or feasibility studies to work on how do we make this stuff a reality. So we're in a very strong, competitive place, even though a lot of communities don't win the grant the first year. We could be one that does. So with that, I think the place to leave it here is a little bit of the call to action, is that there's other county resources and governmental agencies that we really need to work towards bringing to the table as we develop our community in this area. And that's somewhere that, staff can go a long way, but community leadership goes a long way as well. So with that, we'd be looking for any questions. This is just a report for you all for an update, so I don't need any action.
All right, Ms. Collar, we do have a couple questions. We have Councilman Behair and then Ingram. And Jensen, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Chris. On the Elliott Circle item, that is a standalone grant? It's not going to be a part of the Murchison Choice, is it? That 30 to 35 mil, is that for that particular location? Or what we're looking for, I think, what we're going to be applying for in May, if I'm correct or not, with the Murchison Choice, is this a part of that, for this project?
So the 30 to 35 million dollars is a portion of the financing to develop the property, and it's two sites. So it's the Merchant Townhomes and Elliott Circle, and it would be two sites in 3 phases.
So, no, okay, I understand that. So whenever you apply for the grant, the grant that you apply for, is that going to suffice both locations? That's what I was asking. That pot of money.
So $35 million is not enough to do all of it, and so that's part of the gap financing. And it gets real complicated from there, which is why we got Ed. Housing authorities a lot of times do what's called layered financing, and so they'll get resources from a couple of different HUD programs. They'll get resources from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency and from the local government in order to make that a reality. But the grant, if we were to apply for the grant, this is all part of the transformation plan. So the implementation grant would be to implement this 3-phase, 2-site plan.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Colley. So, sometime last year, some council members and myself went to Virginia. I cannot remember the name of the city, something Port. Newport News, thank you. We went to Newport News, and I'm glad you tied into the last piece about partnership. And let me preface this by, I'm really excited about the Elliott Circle, because I lived in Elliott Circle, and I always get a little touchy and emotional because of my experiences in Elliott Circle and Campbell Terrace. And so to be able to provide those families a different light of community that I did not get is honestly just a game changer and gives them a good effort for quality of life. Well, you talked about the partners, and one of the things that we learned when we were at Newport News is they have it together when it comes down to city, municipality partnerships and nonprofit partnerships. They have it together, even from the onset of being able to get resources to the residents before even implementing anything. And so I would like to know a little bit more. You talked about the little free libraries, which is great. I love them. But talk to me a little bit more about, for example, they were able to connect their residents to jobs. They were able to connect their residents to healthcare, exactly. How are we pulling in? And I also do remember they had some type of MOA or resolution of support that would say we would all put our best foot forward in terms of moving this grant forward and being able to get that done. So talk to me a little bit about what that looks like for us and what we have done in that regard, and do we have some type of agreement in place to move that forward? And I think that's my question for right now, and then there may be a follow-up.
So there's a lot there. I think the first thing is that we have to keep in mind that Virginia is structured differently than North Carolina. Mm-hmm. That's first and foremost, right? But as far as partnerships go, partnering with a nonprofit to provide fresh food through a community garden is a huge win. There's several nonprofits working in this area that we're now working with on things like social determinants of health. We're partnering with the Martin Luther King Jr. Committee and enhancing the MLK Park. I could go down the list. There's so many partners and so many key stakeholders that rose up over this 2 years that we got to meet and know and really understand. On the people element, we talked about those community resources and stuff, right? So Fayetteville State University did something this past year. they came off campus, right? And so they took their bookstore, which is used by their students, and they put it on campus. And instead, they made it a entrepreneurial resource hub that anybody in the community can go to and seek resources. So we're seeing a lot of that headway. One of the things that, when you look at somewhere like Newport News, they had several years between their planning grant and their implementation grant. And that gives you a lot of time to put these things together. But then, even then, tens of millions of dollars bring people to the table. And, you know, when you hire somebody like a nonprofit and say, hey, you've got $4 million to help execute our people strategies, magical things start to happen. But Fayetteville has been able to do some pretty impressive stuff with not a lot of money and a lot of heart and grit. And I think that's one of the things that made this experience for me, even though it's just beginning and we've got a lot more to do, really, really special.
Okay, and then when in terms of this plan, the overall plan for the corridor, when I lived in Atlanta, I was a member of a co-op, community invested grocery store. And it's no secret that that's pretty much somewhat of a food desert. Most people rely on Suburban Mart, Family Dollar store, but that's not necessarily gonna meet the needs in terms of groceries. So if possible, could we look at incorporating some form of a community vested co-op grocery store to come to the corridor?
There's a couple of pieces that are needed, right? You need someone to lead it. You need land to build it, and you need money to build it, right? We have programs that can help with money. We need, just like, you know, we talked about this last week, right? We need folks in the community to raise their hand and say, that's a project I'm going to take on, right? Because it's not going to be a staff-run grocery store, right?
Right.
And so how's that going to work? And so we have resources to help make things like that a reality, but we do need somebody to raise their hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, great work that you have done for the past 2 years, and I honestly believe that we are going to get this grant because we have, I know last year we went up to Washington and they were very impressed of the work that y'all had done. So we are on the map, so I have good thoughts of us getting this. The one question that I have, and you might have said it, but I want to make sure that it's for the listening audience. This housing that we are talking about doing, is it going to be mixed use or is it all going to be, affordable housing? I know that you had talked about the houses that people are going to be able to buy, but is there going to be any mixed use in this?
So there's definitely a mixed income is a requirement of the
I'm
grant.
sorry, mixed
Yeah.
income.
That's
I'm
all right.
sorry.
I knew what you meant. Yeah. But we are also approaching that in a lot of different ways, right? By having that missing middle housing where you've got duplexes and townhomes and different housing types mixed in as well. But yeah, mixed income is a requirement for the Choice Neighborhoods grant.
Okay, so it is a requirement that our teachers and our police officers and things like that will be able to get into these affordable housing?
Yeah, and then, you know, affordable housing, that's a big term, right? I live in an
Absolutely.
affordable house,
Yes.
you know, and so we all want to be able to afford where we live.
Absolutely.
But yes, this is different income levels would be living in these new developments, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jensen. Councilmember Benavente.
Mr. Cawley, you mentioned that we'd be seeking out a professional group to help us in securing this. What happened to the last one that helped us with the implementation grant?
So for the planning grant, we had a grant writer who came in. He helped staff write the grant along with the Housing Authority. We were 1 out of 11 who awarded it. We then brought him on for the full 2-year period to go through the planning process with us. And so when we do, if we get appropriated funding for something like that, then we would put out an RFP, and I would hope he would apply for it. Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Cawley, I know you didn't need any action, but tell us today, I think HUD's director was here, had an opportunity to tour City Hall and kind of give us some positive feedback. Can you share that with council before we move to the next item?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So, one of those stakeholders in our community outreach was a local nonprofit called Kingdom Community Development Corporation. And he's been operating for a long, long time in the community and at the state level. And he was able to use some of his partnerships to get our field policy director for the state to come join us and talk a little bit about where we're at with this program. And so we showed him not only the planning grant and the transformation plan, but we also showed him the actions and activities that city council and staff have taken over the last 10 years to help transform that area. We showed him everything from, the purchase and clearance of V-Point and Pay and some dilapidated, blighted structures, all the way to the city investing $700,000 in small businesses on the corridor and leveraging another $500,000 on top of that. And, my key takeaway there was that, I don't know who will be the HUD secretary at that time, but if it is Secretary Fudge, when she gets our grant and picks up the phone to call somebody about it, he's the guy that answers. And so it was really cool to get to know him and him to get to know our neighborhood. And that was all thanks to Carl Manning at Kingdom CDC.
And Mr. Collins's been a little bit modest as we move to the next item. He was very impressed with the work that was put in by the community, by community development, and by city staff. So you ought to be applauded for that. So thank you for that. He said it was, a very favorable project, from his years of experience. So thank you. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. But thank you, sir.
It takes a village, and I need one.
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm up next as well.
Item 5.02, update on Calisite 1.
All right, I don't know if he's going to be needed for this presentation, but I do have Mr. Wesley Fountain from Fayetteville State University here as well to, in case there's any questions.
Good evening, Mr. Fountain, Vice Chancellor. How you doing?
Before we get to the future, let's look at the history a little bit. So this has been a long time that City Council has been committed to working on the Catalyst site, which is a large tract of land adjacent to downtown in between downtown and Fayetteville State University. So back in 2008, the council commissioned a study for corridor redevelopment, and through actions over the subsequent several years, put a lot of investment into this area and hiring experts and acquiring property, removing blighted property, and really laying the groundwork for something new to happen. At this point, the budget for that project has gotten up to $2.8 million, but that is not just the Catalyst site. That is a lot of the development that's taken place at the entire intersection there, where DOT realigned the road and built the bridge. Recently, our team with Economic Community Development partnered with our nonprofit arm here in town, the Fayetteville Cumberland Economic Development Corporation, to do some site analysis and due diligence. So first off, we want to know, is the site contaminated through all the different uses that have happened over the years? And that came back and said, well, we've got some concerns, but we don't see anything specifically. So we went to the next step and actually drilled into the ground and tested the groundwater, and it all came back okay. Right? Then we had to figure out what's the biggest thing you can build on this site. And so we did some geotech work, and then we wanted to make sure that we had all the wetlands that may be impacted, delineated. So we got the Army Corps out here to look at it, and they made a determination that there's like a little piece towards the road that is a wetland, but overall on the site, it's ready for development. As part of the choice neighborhood we just talked about, we looked at a residential and commercial market analysis. And then we used all that money to issue a request for projects on city-owned land. So we got resources available in this property, and we're looking for a partner to come in to help make a reality of some catalytic project that helps transform this corridor. Our team marketed that request to over 24 local, state, and national developers through connections that our staff has made over the past several years, that Fayetteville Cumberland Economic Development Corporation and our Cool Spring Downtown District has made. Despite all that marketing, one response was received. So to tell you a little bit about that process for that request for projects, it gave an order of events that we would want to follow to go through this. First, we asked for any interested parties to give us a statement of interest in your qualifications. At that point, staff would look at that partner and determine if there was an evaluation and recommendation to City Council to move forward. and then council would consider and approve that partner if that's appropriate. And that's the step we're at tonight. From there, we would look at a time-limited site control. So we would give them, exclusive access and right to the property for a certain amount of time. And during that time period, they've got a lot of work to do, and they've got real money to spend. They've got to hire plans people, they've got to hire engineers and architects, because they've got to come back to us with site plans, elevation designs, and a financing plan for what they're going to do. So that's why we do the site control, and then they come back with a full proposal. And then that gives City Council an opportunity to weigh in on that proposal of what's going to be built there and what they're proposing, and then to sign on to that proposal as a partner. At that point, council would approve a development agreement to include milestones, how we're going to convey the property to that partner, and any additional actions that are required by the developer or by the city to happen. So we do all of this nice and legal. So on the statement of interest piece, Fayetteville State University, as I kind of spoiled the surprise at the beginning, submitted the statement of interest. They're an institution of the UNC system. They're comprehensive and regional in nature with a diverse population of 6,500 students and over 80 faculty and staff. They're also a major economic driver in that they're a top employer. Their students, faculty, and staff, I learned this through their submission, I didn't realize that, have provided over 100,000 hours of community service in the past 15 years. They stated in their statement of interest that they're committed to community outreach, creating economic opportunity, and cultural enlightenment. So we asked them to make sure they understood the city's objectives. And they said that they would work with key stakeholders and other development partners. They will develop something that's innovative, purposeful, and contribute to linking Fayetteville State University with downtown Fayetteville. So their plan is to develop housing and supportive uses on the Catalyst site. Our staff is recommending a partnership with them to develop the site accordingly while ensuring that the city's interest and investment is secured at all times. So the recommendation from city staff tonight is that council move forward with a partnership with Fayetteville State University to develop the full 69 parcels totaling approximately 15 acres by granting Fayetteville State University exclusive rights to the property for a 2-year period. During that time frame, Fayetteville State University would be expected to present a full development proposal, including those site plans, elevation drawings, and a full sources and uses of financing. Depending on those finances needs, our staff and legal will determine the appropriate means of property conveyance at that time. So, just to kind of give you an idea, if council gives consensus tonight to move forward with Fayetteville State University, then as soon as possible that, legal and our team get together and agree with the Fayetteville State University on all the appropriate means, we would bring a resolution and an agreement back to council for approval. Then within 2 years, which we're hoping it's less than that, council would approve a development concept, and then we would take that concept and create a development agreement. And so we hope to get to that point within 2-year period. If Fayetteville State University, for whatever reason, is unable to get there in that 2-year period, they would come back to council and ask for an extension, and that would be council's decision at that time. So that's what we're looking for tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, sir. You do have a couple, Councilmember Hare and then Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Colley, we, as I mentioned during the work, the agenda briefing, I wanted to know as we, and of course I like what I'm hearing, number one, moving forward with something within that area of the corridor, but you just mentioned about a $2.8 million cost thus far within that entire area that has been spent with the city, the citizens' tax base funding. So my question is, how are we, and I did hear what you stated, but say that again, how are we moving forward with, do we look to recoup any of that cost in the proposal and conveying it, as you stated, to the university? I mean, how is that done? How do we recoup the citizens' money that we've already put there? Tell me again, please, on how that's going to be done.
I'm going to be honest, I'm going to tap dance a little bit.
Well, let me try it before you
All
start.
right, go for it. You're better at it.
Mr. Hare.
He's a great dancer over here.
Yeah. Mr. Hare was here, and as Chris said about the meeting we held last week about Murchison Road, this has been a corridor that has been of great interest to you, to the mayor before I knew him, to Councilmember Dawkins, everyone else who had been on council during this time period. We had a report that was compiled, and I never thought we'd be here. I never thought we would be to the point where we actually activated this site. I never thought we'd be to the point where we activated MLK, where we activated, actually had a Walmart for a while at the grocery store.
Yes.
But based on the work that we are, just a little history, we knew that what was there was not suitable for the people who found themselves living there, and also was impeding the further development of the corridor. And so the city undertook a process of a fair compensation for the people who lived there, helping
Right.
the businesses, any that were there. And
Right.
afterwards, we also had the terrible flood that put out some of the businesses as well. And so when we look at the some 47 parcels, some of them large, some of them small, including some paper streets which were in there as well. And the purchase cost that I'm showing on the land, I think, was about $670,000. Now, that does not include the cost of V-Point and Pay Funeral Home, which is on the other side of the street that we're looking at. But our hope is that for the decade or more that we have been trying to acquire those properties, that this is going to be a benefit, and it will be. But we've not worked that out just yet with the university as we move along over the next 2 years.
Right.
What would be helpful, and I will try to reach out to all of you in the conversations, or either tonight or as we move forward, to try to identify what might be some deal points that council wants us to look at. For instance, you will recall when we were doing Hope 6, one of the considerations that the council had, and it was actually part of the plan as well, was that anyone who was displaced also was offered an
Right,
opportunity
right.
also to participate back in.
Correct, sir.
The university doing this, what's really exciting to me is that it's more land than they probably actually need. And so I'm really looking forward to working with them collaboratively to develop that entire site with an eye toward hopefully some of it being taxable and actually put it back on the tax rolls, and if possible. But the ultimate goal is the same one that we had all along, which is to hire and best use. And again, I never thought we'd be here, not any time I was with the city.
Yeah, well, and it's a good proposal. I like what I'm hearing tonight. You know, we discussed this on last week. But, you know, of course, I want to make sure that because we're going to have more discussions, and how do we get to those points? How do we dot those I's as well of all the other things we're going to be talking about? So thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm excited too, because growing up, Vic's Drive-In and Sarge's package store, and I saw Brother Hare over there a couple of times, but we were just observing.
Eating ice
And
cream.
because you could go around to the back, and those were good times. And but I am excited. I do want to ask the Chancellor Fountain to come up. I do have a question. Thank you. And Mr. Caldwell, while he's coming up, I wanted you to discuss what the impact would be if Fayetteville State is able to move forward with maybe dormitories or mixed use. So what's going to be the impact to the area? Will that spur additional development?
So I think right now the synergy between what we just talked about and this cannot be understated.
Gotcha. Because of the Murchison Road corridor,
Absolutely.
the whole, this could spur.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes, sir. And
All right.
so, you know, we've looked at, you know, how do we bridge walking trails from Filter Plant down to downtown? This could be a huge part of that.
Right.
You know, there's a lot that has to happen in this time frame that Fayetteville State has control of the site, where they've got to come up with some of those plans.
All right.
I think having more economic activity in our downtown is a huge part of this.
Gotcha.
Depending on what the university may develop over the next year or so as far as supportive uses, we could see some office and institutional or retail type development on site as well. It's a little too early to try to project out, what really we could see here, but the opportunity to tie a major university in the system to our downtown,
Right.
it's transformational.
All right.
It's catalytic.
Thank you. Since my time is limited, before I get to Chancellor Fountain, Mr. Cawley, well, I asked about the impact, and doggone it slipped my mind. Oh, and the property tax. So, yeah, this land is going to be like a 100-year lease, or it would be deeded to Fayetteville State. Tell me, would it be deeded to the state of North Carolina, since Fayetteville State's a constituent university in the university system?
Dance, Chris, dance. Dance, Chris, dance.
I got this one. So there, the method of conveyance, how much money we ask for the property, if we ask for money, that's all going to be part of what they
All right,
develop
the
over these
proposal.
2 years.
Okay.
But at the same time, Fayetteville State University could ask a private development partner to come in to assist with this development.
Ah.
And in that scenario or a couple of others, it could be taxable.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Chancellor Fountain, welcome. Appreciate you being here. You have been a great asset for the university. Appreciate all the communication that you provide the city on behalf of Chancellor Allison. So, tell me what you're thinking is, or what your committee is thinking about to the council, please.
Absolutely. So, Mayor Pro Tem, council and staff, thank you all for allowing us to be here and talk a little bit about this project. Mr. Colley kind of laid it out on the surface level pretty well. As the university grows over the next 2 to 3 years, we're projected to grow our enrollment from about 6,800 to about 8,000. With that, and we have a little bit more than 80 faculty and staff. It's close to 800, or a little over 800. You were missing a zero.
I missed a zero.
But with that, faculty and staff grows, and so as you all are very well aware of, there is a shortage of, I think, what you all term as market rate housing in Fayetteville. And we feel those pressures not only with our faculty and staff, but even with our students. As Chancellor talked about a little bit a couple of nights ago, about 48% of our students are adult learners. That's 25 years and older. And so these are individuals who live, work, and recreate in the community. And so we feel that as we grow, as the university grows, and some of the strains we have with being landlocked, this is a perfect opportunity to partner with the city. And we very well may bring on other partners to do something around residential living.
Thank you. Before I go to Councilmember Ingram, I just wanted to kind of answer a question and clarify some. Seems like we've been watching this train for a long time. The entire 2.8 is not what the city spent to buy and purchase land. That's an all-in cost, right? So the actual improving of the corridor, the artwork, taking down dilapidated structures, fixing the flooding problem, turning some of that into green space, and then you have the acquisition of the land and the soft cost, environmental 1, 2, and feasibility of the use of the property. That's an all-in figure, correct?
Yes, and there's properties that were purchased across the intersection as well, so that's just really that entire area. Right. The specific pieces we're talking about here are closer to what the manager quoted earlier, like that 670 number. And
as you know, with this being one of the first areas you see coming off the bridge into the downtown area, the evaluation that the increase in valuation along that corridor, if this is done right, I think will recoup the city's funds. But this is a great seed that's been planted over a 10-year period that I think, I'm interested to hear and excited to hear what FSU and others have to bring. So with that, I'll go to Councilmember Ingram and wait for her action.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to quickly say, Chancellor Allison, thank you, Mr. Cawley, but Chancellor Allison, thank you for mentioning that piece about the faculty and staffing being impacted by housing. When I lived in Atlanta and was in higher ed, I had the option where I could lease from my employer, in which I did and was able to have affordable and high-quality housing. So I think for us to be able to give that back to our community and those that are ensuring our next workforce generation is a plus. I would like to quickly highlight how transformative this corridor is about to be. We recently, as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Cawley, had a meeting with community. Chancellor Allison announced a new parking deck, a new aquatic center, new health and wellness center, new Starbucks, new student dorm, and a Chick-fil-A, in addition to our senior center east that's happening in corridor, what we're doing with the Murchison Choice, Veterans Park Phase 2, skate park, and also our maker space. So we are truly creating a groundbreaking corridor for the city. One of the things that I do want to reassure and uplift is that when community sees things like this, we get a little tense, because it also starts to look like gentrification. And so I would, as someone who has been a part of a higher ed system, I would like to kind of give some comfortability to our residents to say we could have no better partner than it being Fayetteville State, because they are our community and the students are our community. So I would ask that, trust the process. If something does not look right, ask your elected officials, call city staff and ask us, and give the opportunity to be able to explain this process to you. But I would not ask any other partner other than Fayetteville State to be any more invested in the corridor. So thank you all for stepping up to this call. With that being said, I would like to provide a consensus motion for staff to prepare a resolution and accompany legal agreements to be brought back to a future council meeting for approval.
I had got a motion by Councilman Ingram. I had a second by Councilmember Hare, Mayor Pro Tem. He's quick draw McGraw today. All right, any discussion on the consensus motion? All right, Council, I look to you for your votes on the iPad.
Yeah, I get up early, sir.
All right, motion carries unanimous. And Mr. Vice Chancellor Fountain, we better clarify that you're Vice Chancellor Fountain, not Chancellor Allison, because hate for you to have to explain that back across the street.
I was thinking that.
I am so sorry.
I was nervous about going back, and someone
do
may feel like I
apologize.
took on a promotion or something. So
All
thank you,
right,
Mr.
thank
Mayor.
you.
Thank you,
Good luck
Council.
to you,
Thank you, staff.
I apologize.
All right, moving on to item 5.03, Fayetteville Forward Bonds Public Safety Project Roadmap. I was about to say, Mr. Cawley, that's you again?
Oh, no, I'll be back. But
All right, Mr. Stone, how are you?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Council. We're here to talk a little bit this evening, to give you just where we're at on the Fayetteville bond, the public safety piece of it, what our steps forward, and just give you some information at this point. So one of the things we're doing is give you an approach to our project management plan. We're going to use a rolling wave planning, and I want to give special thanks to Mr. Brooke Redding. He's done a lot of the heavy work initially on this he's special project manager for Mr. Hewitt. But what it's a little bit different than what we've done things in the past, where it's really an iterative approach, and it's basically a diagram of how we eat the elephant. Put everything in a little smaller pieces. We get consensus, and we get, again, communication, collaboration, accountability. We get a consensus. We get accountability at the first of this, so that we can really get a focus on these items as we move forward. You keep the big picture in mind as you go forward, but that really allows you to focus on these phases as you go through. It helps you go through, make sure we've addressed everything, so we don't get to the end and find something that we had missed along the way. Defining roles and responsibilities. Again, I'm the project manager for this, and my staff, and our construction management group. And then we have a steering committee that is part of, we have representatives from the Fire department, for the fire departments, we have representatives from the police department as well as the 911 dispatch group. So they will be the core of the steering committee, and they will be involved in all of these phases. One bullet that's missing on this is our stakeholders. The stakeholders, as we go through, we want to make sure we include every stakeholder that we need to in each phase, and that way we get the accountability for everyone at that point. And the stakeholders may change as we move from phase to phase, but the steering committee will remain constant as we move forward. Real quick on the 911 center operations, the project goals, of course, to upgrade it. Goal 1 is to upgrade and modernize our existing 911 center. Goal 2 is try to consolidate multiple emergency communication systems and improve our response time. And Goal 3 is provide a reliable and scalable 911 system which looks forward in the future so that we can get some growth here, make sure we have enough to accommodate what we need in the future. And of course, the scope, 911 project aims to develop and implement a new state-of-the-art emergency operations center to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of emergency response services in the city. Right now, the project budget we did, of course, was $30 million for the public safety bond. The projects were divided up. We'll talk about the fire station right now. Right now, the project schedule is 48 to 60 months, and I know that's a long time. When you think about this, and when we get to the phase in the next, we can look at that and see how that time's split up. I did want to point out with this, I think the only recent project we have that's above this as far as would be the stadium as far as the size of this project. So just keeping that in mind. And real quick, just a high level on this. Right now we're in programming. Part of this is we're looking at a lot of things at the programming piece of this. One of these is council has asked us to look at co-location with the county. So we're in the process of bringing someone in to help us look at that. What's the pros and cons of that? And if we don't co-locate, or even if we do, where's the location at? Where do we need to be where this makes sense for this? We've reached out, as you remember, Mission Critical was a group that did a lot of work on this project previously. And we've had them in-house. We're looking at them if there's an opportunity to bring them in and continue this, or do we need to look at them as a possibility of doing an RFQ even larger? When we look at, if you look at the next phase, design phase, part of this programming piece is what does that look like? Because, I mean, there's some opportunities here for some additional contract vehicles we're looking at. Maybe not, we're not going to do a design, bid, build like we've done. Maybe we'll look at a design, build, or even a construction manager at risk. Ms. Toon has set up a meeting later this week so that we can actually talk to some of the groups and see what the benefits and the pros and cons for each of these different vehicles. I've had experience with design, build in the past, in my past life. And so we're going to take that, and hopefully there will be an opportunity here to expand what we've done and maybe bring on some different approaches on some of these. But again, the design phase for something this large, you're looking at 12 to 18 months just in design for this when you're thinking about a system that, or a building that, a center that's this massive. And then when you're looking at construction, this is anywhere from 18 to 24 months just for construction. And then as you move through each one of these, there'll be some overlap as we go through this. And again, this, as you remember, that rolling wave process. And then, of course, operations planning, you have got to be able to make that exchange without losing any efficiency in that time period. So how do you make sure that as you move from the old center to the new center, that you're not losing anything in that, and make sure everything's perfect, so when you make the crossover, no one notices it. That's what the best thing is. As it flips over, nobody sees any change. And so right now we're hoping, again, this is optimistic. This is the 48-month schedule looking at this, that we'd be at in FY27 being able to get this completed. Again, there's a lot of questions at the programming piece of this up front that we have to get answered before we can really look at this timetable, but hopefully a lot of these things can go at the same time and be answered. And I did want to point out, too, as we're doing the programming for the E911 center, also there's a lot of the fire station questions will be approached on this as well as we do the programming. And one of the things we were looking at, maybe there's an opportunity to combine a fire station and a 911 center. That's something that it may be an opportunity where a cost savings, or either it may make sense on the serviceability. Two of our fire stations as well, they're going to have new locations. And so what does that look like? Where do we look at? I know the fire station, Fire Chief Hill's already looked to real estate to look at what's available in the areas where they need to be. There's really, when you start looking at these areas, you can't go too far out of where you're at. You've got to stay within about a half mile to keep those dispatch times appropriate. So a lot of those programming questions for the 911 are also answer those as we move forward to fire stations. Mentioned fire stations, so goal 1 is to provide updated fire facilities to accommodate appropriate firefighting equipment. Most of these stations we're talking about now can't even accommodate the fire apparatus, the firefighting, the fire trucks that they need to. To provide updated fire facilities for firefighters with modern equipment, adequate living quarters. As you know, there's a lot of health issues that are associated with the fire department with their fighting fires, so there's an opportunity here to modernize it, get them modern equipment in, give them opportunity to have a better living quarters. As you know, they're always looking to recruit and to retain, so this is another opportunity to help them with recruitment and retention. And then goal 3 is always to decrease response times and increase the coverage of the fire department. So as we mentioned, the 3 stations are 16, 9, and 2. And of these, we do not have a location for 16 or 2 at this moment. They both need to relocate. 9, the plan is right now to build it on site, so we'll have a temporary facility on the same lot where 9 is, demolish the existing station and bring a new one up. And as we said, the budgets right now for the 3 are $10 million apiece. This was, when we first started this conversation, it was before we actually started Fire Station 4 in earnest, and we know that Fire Station 4 actually came in a little above this. And so we're looking at opportunities. Is there, again, if we can scale this down, or if there are opportunities for each one to be a little more efficient, or do we combine one with the 911 center? Does that give us a little more opportunity in the budget area? And again, for each one of these, as we move forward, it'd be 30 to 42 months per fire station. This gives you kind of a big picture item of this, as like we're in the middle of the 911 now. And what we're really looking at as we go through, you're into programming. So you go from programming to design to the build. So what we would like to do as we were into programming is one, as we move into design for the next, that we can pick up for the next one, start the programming for it. And then we move into construction, and then we would start the design. So as we try to phase these out, and that way we're not overloading we would love to have opportunities to have multiple bidders. That's always a key for keeping our bid prices where we need to be. If some competition, we get multiple bidders on this. So again, we will fine tune this as we come before you later, as we get our information in front of us, and hopefully we can keep these on schedule and they won't slide too much to the right. The next steps and expectations I mentioned really we're looking at to co-locate with the county. That was a question the council brought to us, so we need to have that opportunity to talk with someone who can give us the pros and cons for that, and then where we're at, then we approach what does that look like for us and for the county. And then, of course, the location, what does that mean? And then, as I mentioned, 16 and 9 do not have locations set yet, so we'll be in that process, which is actually our real estate office is already looking, as I mentioned before. And then our next steps for the 911 center is complete our project management plan, and really I'm meaning the project plan for the next phase. So as we move through our phases, and so we focus on where we're at the moment, but it'll affect as we move forward on the next phases. And then hire a consultant to assist with programming. What does this look like? As I mentioned, Mission Critical was a key partner in the previous studies. So is there opportunity to bring them back in and expand on the work they've already done, or we need to put out a larger RFQ? So that's where we're working through that piece, and also the fire stations, the same items with the fire stations. And is there opportunity here to maybe combine all 3 of them, or 2 of them or 3 of them in a different format than just doing them separately? So got a lot of questions more right now than we have answers, so we're working on that now, and we're getting everyone in lined up to help get those answered. So here to answer any question. I went through that kind of quick.
Councilman Harris has a question, then I have one.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Brown, as we look at our local contractor, and this is probably something that our purchasing will have to speak of, but when we look at our local contractor participation, how successful have we been being in the past?
I'll have to refer to Ms. Toomey.
Mr. Stone.
And we can actually come back with, I think we owe you an update on that as well.
Okay.
Where we are with the disparity study and other items, so we can program that for an upcoming work session.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Yes, sir.
DJ will assign you a name. All right. Listen, I only have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
One, there may be an opportunity to leverage the dollars from this bond with grants, particularly from Department of Energy, if certain things are done. You showed $60 million worth of construction between 911 and the 3 fire stations. Are any of these LED certified or any type of construction design being put in place that they are energy efficient, that reduces the carbon footprint, that could help us leverage these dollars?
We haven't got to that point yet, Mr. Mayor, but that's definitely something we'll look at as part of that when we move forward. Yes, sir.
All right.
And I did want to stress that that is not just construction, that is a total project, so, yes.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you. Something Councilmember Hare triggered in my thought process. When we could begin the piece of to put out RFPs for bids, in the last bond, contracts pretty much kept going to the kind of the same entities. Can we ensure that there is a strong effort, and I think this is possible because now we have the Fayetteville Cumberland hub directly up the street, but can we make sure that there is a strong effort, and especially speaking because we are working towards our disparity study, that we have equity at the forefront when we're doing our bids, and getting our local-owned businesses to be able to be prepared to bid. I know PwC does a great job at putting out information about the bid workshops, but it's a different ballgame, my perspective, when it's time to look at projects such as a bond and whatnot. So can we make sure that we really hone in on that when we start the bidding process?
Yes, ma'am. PwC does a great job. We do a better job. And I can tell you that Kim Toon and her staff and the council has made this a priority since I came back in 2015 and before. It was the council's effort that led PwC to also do the disparity study. They joined with us. Not knocking PwC because they do an amazing job. They really do. And we have rejected bids because people haven't made good faith efforts. We have worked with contractors to the point where they did not, had to stop using them because they didn't have a GC license, so we're almost ready to exceed their authority to do work. We do everything we can legally, which is important, but also in the spirit of council's concern, but more could be done. And so please continue to encourage people who want to do business with the city to reach out to Kim Toon. I think we send somebody to her at least a couple times a month. And what we're really lacking now is competition. So we would love to bring on as many people as we can so that we don't have to continue to put bids out because we only get one bidder. And that's part of the effort, I think, that Kim and Rob Stone were talking about, of looking at other delivery methods that may allow us to even do more of that. But we have it on our forefront, and we can always do better. But I tell you, I'm very, very proud of the work that we're doing. We can always do better.
Thank you. And to your point, even when we are having to turn people away because they don't have X, Y, and Z, or they need this, I would like for us to be able to set them up for success, to be able to come back and say, all right, we got it now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right. Mr. Stone, you didn't need anything, it's just an update?
No, sir.
Are you doing the infrastructure one as well?
No, sir. That's
All
not
right.
mine.
Item 5.0304.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
This is Miss Sheila Ambat. How you doing, Miss Sheila?
Good evening. I am trying to... Has this been loaded up? Okay, just a minute. That's this one? That one. All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Today, Public Services staff would like to present to Council the proposed locations for public infrastructure improvements to include selected streets, for resurfacing, locations for sidewalk, construction and bike lanes in response to the November ballot and voter approval of the $25 million general obligation bond for infrastructure. Our staff have worked extensively on this, and we've worked with the City Manager's Office, Assistant Director for Engineering Byron Reeves, and Assistant Director for Infrastructure and Maintenance, Transportation and Infrastructure Maintenance will present tentative locations and timeframes, and we will all be on standby for questions, concerns, and specific direction. With that, I'll turn it over to our Assistant Director for Engineering to get started, and then Assistant Director for Traffic and Infrastructure Maintenance will talk about sidewalks.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So just kind of a header slide. This slide was included in the December presentation that was given, but it gives kind of the allocation for the different dollar amounts we're seeking for the public infrastructure bond. We've got about $15 million going towards street resurfacing, $8 million towards sidewalks, about $800,000 towards bike lanes, and then there was $1.25 million that was for intersection improvements, which we can discuss a little bit later in the presentation. So when we talk about resurfacing, these are some slides that we had from our pavement condition presentation that we gave to you guys back in October. So how do we select the streets that we're presenting to you tonight? We've pulled them out of our paver software. And so there's an algorithm in the paver software that looks at the critical PCI, which is the pavement condition index, street classifications, our yearly budget, time period, and then proposed treatment types. And it makes recommendations for selected streets that we should do based on the budget that we have. So if you look at this map, this is where we're proposing roughly the about $15 million worth of street resurfacing. So this is about 40 miles, which is a little over 5% of the entire street network. We also, if you'll notice in your council packet, there is a link that'll take you to this website. It's an interactive map. You can zoom in. You can see what your PCI score is for your individual street segment, also when we propose on resurfacing your street. So if you look at a long-term forecast, what we're proposing for resurfacing, we're ready to go ahead and get started. So we would like to advertise what we're calling phase 1 in March, so this month. So we've decided to break it into 3 phases. We would advertise a contract in March of each year and begin construction in August of each year. So if you look at a short-term forecast, 30-day projection, we'd like to advertise a contract for about $6 million to resurface streets. 60-day projection, we'd receive bids and evaluate. We'd like to have that before council for a bid recommendation within 90 days, and we would like to be putting asphalt on the ground within 180 days. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lee and Sidewalks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Lee Jernigan, Assistant Public Services Director, and we're going to give you, again, proposed locations as a first cut for sidewalks and bike lanes. Okay, as Mr. Reeves mentioned, there was about $8 million that we had estimated for sidewalks. That's about 15.5 miles. The locations were basically the entire 5-year CIP was funded, of which generally the projects included there were determined from the pedestrian plan which council approved in May of 2018. So listing those projects, and I will not go down each one unless you ask me to do so. That is the list of projects along with a map, and I can flip back and forth that shows the districts that those overlap. The unique thing about sidewalk is it overlaps districts a lot, because one side of the road may be in a district, the other side may not, and roadways are typically the boundaries. So we'll pause there for just a moment. And again, that note's about the 15.5 miles, roughly $8 million. Obviously, those are estimates. If you look to the first column, which I'll describe a little more in detail shortly, we've broken them into short, mid, and long-term type projects, and that's generally based on the complexity of how long it would take to deliver one of those projects, whether or not right-of-way may need to be procured. There's a more complex design that we foresee at this planning level that would need to take place. So that's the determination we use to break them down into short, medium, and long. Our bike projects, we had originally, when we started this journey, estimated around $800,000, and that would be for 4 areas. They were also noted in the bicycle plan. Staff determined these areas based on a lower, basically building bike lanes, which is a less complex project that can be delivered somewhat quicker than, say, a multi-use path or a separated bike lane away from the roadway. If you look on this map, and I wanted to, the 4 locations are listed at the top. The map, if you'll key in on the blue lines, those are the 4 locations. If you'll see the locations of other streets that may have some sort of color on it, doesn't matter if it's brown or green or whatever color, those are existing bicycle lane facilities. So I know it's small, but the intent was to be able to provide additional connectivity with these 4 proposed projects. I want to speak to the schedule a little bit before we get to intersection improvements, because that is a little unique. As you can see on our schedule here, ideally we broke the short, mid, and long term. Short meaning construction ideally would begin within 12 to 18 months. The midterm construction would begin more in the 18 to 36 month period, and the long term it would begin more in the 36 to 48 month period. Theoretically, should council approve these locations, we would generally begin a big bulk of them in the short term. It just would take longer to get to a construction time for the longer term, more complicated projects. Lastly, intersection improvements, and we will ask council for some direction here. When we started again this journey back about a year ago, we estimated $1.25 million for redoing 5 intersections, and that's what our original presentation was to you. Since that time, we have received funding from ARPA and state direct grant funds that actually funded those 5 locations. So at this point, there are no more city-maintained traffic signal intersections that were identified in the pedestrian plan. We built them all. So depending upon council's direction, staff can go back and determine additional locations that were not identified and bring those forward. Or, as we're beginning this, there's $1 million there that could be held in reserve till we start getting projects bid. We can start seeing how costs are coming in, and then reassign it potentially to other infrastructure projects, or proceed with some intersection improvement projects at a later time. Typically, they are delivered a little faster as compared to, not resurfacing, that's probably the fastest, but as compared to sidewalks or bike lanes, they are probably delivered a little faster. So with that concludes our presentation, and we are certainly open to any questions for any one of our group.
I do have a question. It's more of a concern than question. So I remember we had to do some ADA compliant rumble strips at the corners of intersections so on Winslow and Blunt Street, there's that intersection, but there's no sidewalk around it, and it upset me because in my brain I said this could go somewhere else because there's nothing there. It's a warehouse building, not even used. Is there a better way to eye that in terms of being able to put that down? Because I really believe that was just, unless there's a sidewalk that's going to go there, I felt like it was a waste of resource to be able to just put that there, and couldn't nobody push their wheelchair on it if there's a sidewalk, but there is a small ramp there.
And I believe you're speaking to the intersection there at the railroad.
Yes, yeah. Winslow and Blunt, where Iron Forge is.
Yes, ma'am. So, yes, ma'am. there's funds that were received. I mentioned ARPA funding intersection improvement projects, the ADA ramp retrofit project, and I'll call it that. Brooke was paramount in getting us funds for that. Those ramps were replaced as a part of it. So there's a few $100,000 that we have already received that's going citywide to replace ramps. The challenge at your location there is the railroad. And traveling down Winslow Street is possible, but crossing over the railroad presents a separate challenge. Legally, and again, I won't speak for Brooke, but legally, if the ramp was there and was insufficient to the current ADA standards, we would be required to replace it.
No, what I'm saying is, why would it have gone there if there's no sidewalk attached to it at all? It's literally grass attached to it. Solely what my question is, out of all the locations in the city where there are places of walkability where people do need that type of ADA accessibility ramp and sidewalk to be there, we chose a place where there was no sidewalk there, no walkability, and I'm sure there are other locations. So what I'm asking is there a better way to track that? Because nobody can use that.
We'll
What we
certainly
can
check
do,
on-
Lee, what we can do is we'll go and take a look at that. Because I'm somewhat unfamiliar with it right now, but it could have been any number of things. But if it doesn't make sense to you, it probably won't make sense to us. So we'll take a look at it and we'll report back.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I remember correctly, when I put in a councilman's request to put in sidewalks on Graham Road leading up to 71st High School, I thought we had a consensus that we was going to look at sidewalks around schools first. And as I noticed, there are no additional sidewalks going around 71st High School. Is there a reason behind that, or are we just going by the study that you did previously?
Again, we're here for first cut tonight, Mr. Thompson. We pulled these locations from the CIP that were previously on some project plan.
Years ago?
It was 5-year CIP.
Okay.
So we're certainly open to any feedback from council to revise where the locations would be.
Well, I would just like to, for us to adhere to what we said we was going to do, and that was to look at sidewalks around every school in the city to make sure our kids were safe to go to and from school.
All right, thank you, sir. I got Councilmember Benavente and then Jensen.
On slide number 11, you mentioned that what makes something short, mid, or long-term, specifically for the long-term, had to do with maybe some unique aspects of that area. Is one of those potential unique aspects the need to do additional stormwater related?
Potentially. That is specifically one of the reasons why one of the bike projects is long-term, because there's a companion stormwater project in the area, and we obviously didn't want to
One before the other.
do correct.
I'll make sure. Thank you.
All right, thank you, great question. So this is the first cut, Councilmember Jensen, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to go back to what Councilmember Thompson was saying. I do remember, and as I was looking at the list myself, we said that we were going to do sidewalks around schools. And so what I can say is I know in my situation, and I'm sure that there's other situations around high schools in my district, we have no sidewalks because I have donut holes. So we have Andrews Road that kids are walking to school on grass, no stoplight, no nothing. And it is because, it's part city, it's part county, and these kids are just walking any way and which way that they can. So I want to thank Councilmember Thompson for bringing that back up, because I was sitting there looking at it trying to figure out how I was going to say it. So I personally think that we need to go back and look at the high schools and the elementary schools that we had talked about doing for our sidewalks. Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Jernigan, also, you asked about intersection improvements. I put in a request about lowering the speed limit on Stony Point Road. We've had 2 fatal accidents within the past 6 months, with 2 individuals passed away due to speeding on Stony Point Road. We had another major accident on Graham Road and Strickland Bridge Road, where the Wawa gas station is right there, where I asked to put a stoplight in. If it's council's will, I would hope that you would look at those intersections also. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, sounds good. And Mr. Jernigan, I'm sure we'll be in touch with you.
Yes, sir.
We'll get a
Thank
little
you.
closer.
Yeah, I think I wanted to also follow up. So when the initial pedestrian plan was created, it was created with the understanding, including the fact, connectivity among schools. And so this plan was presented because it was the understanding that the original pedestrian plan included connectivity as it related to schools, but that was just one factor. So going back and looking specifically, exclusively at schools will also take some time for staff. We haven't determined what that will look like. But we'll certainly come back to council to understand specifically looking at connectivity for schools. That will take some time for staff to come back. We just want to make sure that we would clarify the original PED plan did look at that as one factor.
Ms. Ambett, I have a follow-up to that.
Yes.
Didn't we do like a walkability plan that included connectivity of the whole city? Shouldn't we have a plan that has some of those locations where the schools are already?
I'm not sure if that was part of the original PED plan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. That was part of the original PED plan. That, again, that was approved in 2018. So we'll be applying for a grant to update that plan this year. But connectivity to not only schools, but to also, I'll say destinations, which typically would be like a rec center or commercial center or something, was included as a part of that. The focus was mainly, for thoroughfares, because we were so much more in need of sidewalk along thoroughfares, so
Yeah, I'm just trying to say, I got you. I'm just trying to save you some steps that we haven't had any new school construction since 2018. You should have some visibility of where those institutions are, right?
We do, but I think that from a constructability, there's going to be other factors when you look at adding sidewalk just exclusively around schools. Besides, there is no sidewalk, there is the question of constructability, there's the question of funding, and because the harder it becomes based on topography, so on and so forth, the price goes up. So I think those were factors that we haven't really looked at from a planning perspective and will be somewhat of a challenge as we look at exclusively connectivity around schools because of the other factors that are involved.
But Mr. Mayor and Council, we do hear you. And that's something that, as Sheila said, we will take a look at. And thank you, Mayor, for as well. We did, you may recall, the Safe Routes to School, all the grant money that we applied for. So we have looked at this, but we've not looked at it as exclusively as you've asked us tonight, but we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Ambett.
So, Mayor, with before we bring Chris back up, on the other item and this item, while we know we have some more work to do with you about the locations, after Chris finishes, we would welcome you receiving all 3 reports, not necessarily saying those are the locations, but just so we can capture that we did, of course, bring it back to you. And you appear to be largely in agreement with the direction and the progress of staff.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Caller, you back again?
Last one. Let's see if we can keep that trend rolling. All right, so this is about the next steps for our housing opportunity bond. Just to kind of recap council's actions here regarding housing in our community, you have continuously provided direction on taking local action to address housing challenges in our community. There's a whole list of things here, with the kind of crescendo to that being that you authorized a $12 million housing opportunity bond, and then our community said yes to that. And so tonight we're looking to just make sure that council is in agreement with the steps that staff is going in the direction that we're taking with these funds. So just to kind of remind you too, you revised our housing policy to make it more inclusive of all housing types. That's that missing middle. To educate and train the community so that we can get more community-based housing developers. We opened our application process up. It used to be once a year, and now it's all year round. We talk to housing developers for potential projects on a weekly basis now. We've given priority in the redevelopment areas where we can. That's not always feasible, but where we can, we're prioritizing those identified areas. And we're working to incorporate other development finance incentives into that as well to help solve some of those gaps that traditional grant money doesn't necessarily solve. And then last, we committed to bring any housing development that has assistance greater than $100,000 to council for review and approval. So just to talk you through the housing study that you all commissioned back in 2020, there's a couple of key points on here. There's a lot of moving parts to the numbers here. So first off, home ownership has declined. So while households grew 8% from 2010 to 2018, there was a 10% decrease in home ownership. This is done on census data and another survey called the American Community Survey. So that's why the numbers are a little bit aged. Those things get updated every 5 years. And it's the best comprehensive data sources that we get. Another kind of key finding here was that when compared to owners, renters were a lot more cost burdened, which makes sense, right? Your mortgage typically doesn't go up every year. Rent goes up every year. Another kind of key point that we found in looking through all of this was that units need to be affordable at the very lowest. So you can see the gap here between the blue and the green is the number of available versus the number of households. And so where green is higher than blue, that means that we have much less available at that price range and much, much more need. And then generally speaking, we have about 80,000 households in Fayetteville, and 20,000 of them are cost burden. And what cost burden means is that they're paying more than 30% of their income, their total household income, for rent and utilities. So we just wanted to kind of remind council of what that study showed us as we kind of look towards the recommendations that staff has made on how to attack these issues. So the plan came up with 4 goals: improve knowledge and access to resources that are out there, increase the number and diversity of housing options, preserve existing housing and ensure that our housing that we do have is of a quality, and support self-sufficiency. So out of those 4 goals, we came up with 14 strategies that council adopted at that time. And so we're going to go through these kind of briefly. Where you see a blue star, that is an item that the Housing Opportunity Bond can address, and right now we are proposing to address those. So the first thing was to develop a website with resources on it. We've done that. We update that frequently. Support community organizations providing like first-time home buyer workshops and educational credit counseling, things like that. Conduct landlord outreach regarding opportunities. Establish a housing trust fund with policy guidelines and a process. Identify publicly owned developable land. Leverage state and federal funding for repair and rehab programs. And create a location policy to incentivize development. So that was all the short term. That was the 2-year deal. We're about on track with that. We're about 1.5 years from adoption of that study, so we're doing pretty well there. So the midterm strategies, the idea was that was going to be year 3 and 4. So one of the things was to support acquisition of property to form a land bank. So that one's got a blue star beside it. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Encourage affordable housing provisions for developments requesting variances. So as development projects come before council, that is council's decision if you want to ask for affordable housing provisions to happen at that time. Create a periodic residential inspection program. Now this isn't RAMP, but the synergy between our fair housing folks in human relations and our code enforcement folks who look at minimum housing, they work really well together to look at those issues and come up with it to make sure that our housing comes to at least that minimum housing standard. 4.3 here was enhanced down payment assistance for special populations. That's got a blue star beside it. I'm really excited to share some news about that. And then improve partnerships with economic development organizations to improve economic mobility for community residents. So last year, we used some of our federal grant funds towards helping with job opportunities and workforce development for low income, and we're proposing to continue that. We'll be back in about a month or so to talk more about that. On the long-term strategies, this was supposed to be 5+ years out. And that's because communities don't normally respond as quickly as Fayetteville did. And my staff feels it. But increasing gap financing for construction and preservation of affordable mixed income and mixed-use housing. So I'm very proud to say that with the work that council has done and our staff has led, that is complete and ongoing. But funding is always an issue, and so that's why it's got a blue star beside it, because that's something we can do with this housing bond. And then reducing local barriers for development of missing middle housing and infill housing. Y'all know this one all too well, right? This has to do with single-family neighborhoods and allowing other housing types in it. It gets immensely personal to people where they live, and that's tough decisions that council has to make on a per project basis. So what we're proposing to do with this funding is new housing development. Rental development is the most cost-effective, fastest, and as we saw on the chart, the most needed type. Single family can be done too. It's built by a developer, but they've got to do a couple of things. They've got to find qualified home buyers and then build a new or renovate a modest home, and then put those two things together, and the city can help close the gap in a lot of different ways. Repair and rehab. We have community partners in Fayetteville Urban Ministry and Habitat for Humanity that do this stuff for a living. We fund them with quite a bit of federal grant funds each year, but they could always use more. Right now, that program is constrained to low-income homeowners, but it could be further constrained to very low-income homeowners. It could be constrained to, seniors or any other type of special population that council would decide. But right now, staff is recommending to constrain it to low-income, like our rest of our grants. And then down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. This is the nice one. So we'll be able to use bond funds to go up past the 80% area median income up to 120%. Now that place between 80 and 120% is generally referred to as workforce housing. And so there's a lot of communities that are on the cutting edge of doing this, and Fayetteville can now open up a program that increases the income level for our down payment assistance. So that's going to be really exciting, and I'm going to need a person to help with that intake. So we'll be asking for bond funding to help with a specialist to help with processing down payment assistance. And then last is one of those items that's been on that 14 strategies for a while, and we weren't sure how to kind of approach it, is to take a little bit of this housing money and come up with a strategic plan for land banking opportunity. There's a lot of kind of what do we buy, how do we buy it, what does that look like, and then what is the legal framework around it that needs to be done so that we can put a land banking program into operation. So those are the programs that staff is recommending us go into. Now, this is pretty much what cities do for housing. Some cities do less, but you'd be hard-pressed to find one that does more. So what that looks like on kind of a planning horizon and a timeline, we probably won't have this money this long, but it gives you a good visualization of what we're looking at. And essentially, we're saying to prioritize rental development on strategic properties that make a lot of sense for us to invest this money in. Next up, single-family development. So helping to bridge those gaps for someone who wants to build 20 houses on one street, and how can we help them bridge those financial gaps and then connect them with qualified home buyers. Put a little bit more money into our repair and rehab program. This right here has over a 5-year period, give or take, it's about $200,000 a year. We already fund about $600,000 a year from grant money. So this would add more capacity to those programs as well. Down payment assistance, we've got that at $1 million, and then land banking opportunity at $100,000. Now the thing with all of these funding sources is we can't control the timing of when people buy a house or when developers come to us asking for funding, right? So this money puts us in a position where we are well prepared to respond and also to market these resources to the private sector. If we find in a year that we have already spent $1 million in down payment assistance, then we're going to have to readjust the plan, right? Because we're not going to stop doing that. And so these numbers will flex over time, but we wanted to lay this out so that council and the community had a kind of an understanding of what we're trying to achieve here, right? We need to help those extremely low income people have an affordable place to live so that they can save and build towards a down payment for a home. We want to help provide for more single-family development. That could be acquisition and rehab of existing housing to increase our housing quality and put a first-time home buyer in it. And then repair and rehab of existing homeowners to help our seniors age in place and to increase that housing quality overall. And then down payment assistance going up to our workforce level for the first time in Fayetteville so that we can help that entry-level teacher and that police officer who just got married buy their first home. So we want to talk to you about accountability a little bit too. So I report monthly to the Fayetteville Redevelopment Commission, and that is a citizen advisory board that you all appoint. They're charged with planning and implementing the economic and community development programs in our community. They're also our primary mechanism for getting input from the citizens and policy formulation related to all the issues that are kind of surrounding our department. They meet on the first Wednesday of each month at Festival Park. That meeting is open to the public and advertised. On a quarterly basis, we have a comprehensive performance report. It's about 12 to 15 pages long. It talks about all the different activities and projects and programs our department is doing and where we're moving and in what direction. That report will now feature a housing opportunity progress report that will show that myself and my assistant director, Torres, met with X number of housing developers in the last quarter, and that this is the outcome of those conversations, that we had this many down payment assistance applications come through, and this is how many were approved, and this is what we're seeing why people weren't approved. And all of that information will be in that report that's done quarterly. So now that we've got this money, what are we doing? Well, the good news is a lot of it is continue what we're already doing. We're just able to do it bigger and better now, right? We're going to continue meeting with and creating relationships with housing developers across the community and the state. There's some really cool folks here in town doing great work, but then there's also some folks up in Raleigh and Durham and even over in Sanford that are doing great jobs. Developing partnerships with smaller landlords. If you own a couple of houses near each other and you're willing to rent to a certain income level, we can help you make sure that house has a decent roof on it and the plumbing and the HVAC works, because it's tough when you're dealing with low rents and trying to maintain a house. Yeah. Build up existing nonprofit capacity or help create a new one to develop single-family homes for qualified buyers. It is tricky to do this with for-profit folks. You can, but essentially the best answer we have for them is down payment assistance, right? With a nonprofit, I can fully finance the construction of the house, and then just like anybody else, when you close on it, we get our money back and can reinvest that again. And so we need a strong nonprofit looking to do that in our community. And then we're going to continue hosting our real estate development workshops on a biannual basis to help people understand the basic concepts of commercial real estate development, how that works in the context of affordable housing, and how they can get involved if they're interested. Starting July 1, we would prepare marketing materials and expand our down payment assistance program to that workforce level. We'd hire another community development specialist as a housing navigator. So this person would not only take those down payment assistance clients, but a lot of times council encounters folks who are having trouble finding housing resources or finding, what do they do where they, now that they found themselves in a challenging situation. And y'all call my office, or you call the manager and then he calls my office. And so I've got a team that's helping to do some of that, but this would allow me to have a dedicated person to learn about housing resources in our community, provide down payment assistance, and help navigate those folks. We would also expand our homebuyer education workshops. Right now we do one a month at FTCC. They're really popular, and so we'd look at, do we do 2 a month? Do we do it at a separate location? How do we do that more so that people can begin the journey to buying their first home? Sometimes that journey begins with looking at the realities of how much you're paying for your car payment right now, and what you're spending money on as opposed to getting ready to buy a house. And then we would expand our rehab programs with those partner agencies to enable them to do more and to also work at a higher, more professional level. And I think that's what I've got for you.
All right, I have a question for Councilmember Harry, then I had a question.
Thank you. Chris, item 2.3, bullet 2.3, if you have businesses that want to be a part of this program, especially some of these smaller property owners, as you just mentioned, this 3.2 inspection program, and you somewhat alluded to ramp, is this what that is supposed to be close to, and is that only for those that buy into the program?
Yes, sir. So there's a couple of pieces at work here. So one is we have a fair housing department that deals with fair housing violations. We also have code enforcement that goes out and identifies issues. When we partner with a landlord that's going to take some money from the city and fix up their house and then rent it to the correct populations, we have to go out on an annual basis and make sure they're still doing all those things. And so those three components make up that residential inspection program.
So that's where the 3.2 comes in, those that have bought into the program?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was just, because I remember we were trying to do this before, and then we had issues between, I think, as far as the state went in trying to change entering property owners.
That's right,
Yeah,
yes.
and I was just wondering, so.
So this is by
if they
invitation
buy
or by
into it, then-
violation.
Okay,
Right.
I got you.
Yes, sir.
I got you, all right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Cawley, couple questions. So this is the bond money. This is not HUD block grant money. So the bond money is what the voters approve, a lot less restrictions because it's general fund dollars that we'll get from the additional tax that they agreed to pay. So I have a question. If you go back to your stats that talked about, and these are 2018 up through, good through 18 numbers, right?
Yes, sir.
So he said the number of homeowners decreased, meaning the number of renters increased during that period of time of 2010 to 2018,
Yes, sir.
right? So on your allocations, even though we don't have those same restrictions, we have 9 times the amount of money going to rental development than we do to home ownership.
Yes,
Why
sir.
is that?
So right now, we don't know how much we're going to be able to get through with down payment assistance. We don't know what that demand is going to be, right? And so that's why I said we would come back periodically and adjust this. It takes a lot of money to build an apartment complex, right? And so some of the projects that we haven't traditionally financed could be a $4 or $5 million deal. And so the good chunk of money would go towards that. When you look at some other larger municipalities and the money that they put for their housing bonds, they follow a similar trend to this. And so we're looking at, down payment assistance right now at $1 million. That's 40 first-time homeowners within the 5-year period. If that number, if we do 10 the first year, then we got to look at this and do the math over again, right?
I'm with
Yeah.
you, but in context, right? If you, let's say
Mr.
40
Mayor?
people became homeowners,
Right, and Mr.
but,
Mayor.
but 500 people became renters.
Yes, and one of the things that Chris did not, I don't know if you really touched on it, was looking at the income levels of some of the folks that we're trying to get in. Some of the folks, it's very, very challenging for them to get in a house and then stay in a house. And
Well, let me follow where I'm going.
Yes,
I got you.
There we go.
So the block grant money takes care of the very poorest among us, correct? Everything is targeted to low to moderate income.
Yes, sir.
Federal regulated dollars have those goals. We have a population that is above that is being missed, and I hate to see our pathway of general fund dollars, voter-approved local dollars, follow the same trajectory as the federal dollars who are already addressing that. There's no way that I would like to see 500 rental units versus 40 homeowner units. How can we get, I understand the multifamily footprint, right? You got more bang for your dollar, but there has to be a way to create, whether it is small condos or townhouses that people can own for a population that can actually pay for it, because somebody in low to moderate income don't have the income to sustain a mortgage. So that is unrealistic in the outcome of that. That population is already here. So how do we change that inverse? So I know you may not have the answer tonight, but if this is the first pass at that, I hope that we would rebalance that, because what we're doing is adding to the problem of more renters versus owners. We're at 10 times the rate and 9 times the investment. So I just wanted to point that out. Second thing is, are the development dollars for developers only nonprofit, or can for-profit developers who are meeting the need of a targeted population get in the game? Because I saw that it said that this was for not for profit, or we were going to build more or help stand up more not for profit. So can for-profit companies get in the game if they're doing this work?
Yes, sir. The challenge with for-profit is we're really limited there to down payment assistance for that workforce housing. That's the biggest thing that the city, that local governments can offer to for-profit single-family developers. If we were to say,
So even though the money is going to the need of the person who's becoming the homeowner and you're helping them fill the gap, how is that affected whether they're buying it from a nonprofit Chodo or a for-profit company?
yeah, so, so Chodo is like a very specific thing. So if we just kind of forget about that,
Okay.
right? So whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, right? So nonprofits generally understand that they're going to make very little money off of the sale of the house. They'll get maybe like a $10,000, $20,000 developer fee, and they have to sell those houses to a specific population. Now, with a for-profit, they might sell that house to anybody, but if it's somebody within that workforce gap, we can provide down payment assistance to them. And that's generally why, because for-profit
that's what I was
developers don't
asking.
want to be restricted when they go to build that house, right? They want to sell it to the person who can afford it the most. They want to maximize their profits. Right?
Well, I think we need to clarify that in the language, because it looks like this is only applicable to nonprofit folks. But you're saying as long as they sell to the client that meets that qualification, because the money is really going to the benefit of the person buying the house, not the company, right?
Yes, sir. But like I said, the gap we have is we have for-profit housing home builders. The gap we have is we do not have, other than Habitat's model, a nonprofit housing builder.
But if we need more houses built, does it matter that it's a Habitat model or for-profit who agrees to sell it at the price that you're looking for?
Yeah, it's all about that income restriction and what they can afford, right? So it's from that 140% AMI, what they can afford.
Okay. All right, I got you. All right.
And
Go
sir,
to-
if I can add, it's also about what developer has the capacity to do the work that we need them to do. So we're not ruling out any developers, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit. We would never do that. We just want to make sure that folks have the capacity to do the development that needs to be done.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Call. Councilmember McNair.
Yes, I have a question for either of you. The houses on, I guess the Habitat on Bunts and Old Bunts, and those housing, I noticed that they have very small backyards, and some of them have privacy fences around them, and some of them, most of them doesn't. And I noticed that a lot of them have at least the amount of storage space, which their backyards are starting to look a little cluttered. I guess my question would be, is there funds for privacy fences for those homeowners so that they can enclose their backyard so they have a little more privacy?
Yes, ma'am. So Habitat approached us like 3 or 4 months ago, maybe at this point, and said that was an issue that was happening in the neighborhood. We also heard that from a couple of council members as well. And so we're working with them right now to develop a project that adds a fence along Bunts Road, so that there's also some four-wheelers that are cutting through from other neighborhoods, and there's some stuff happening out there. And so we're looking to make that enhancement out there.
Yeah, and we also have people driving on the lawn in the back and parking, making actually a parking lot there. I have constituents calling me all the time complaining about that. You guys are taking care of that? You are?
So, Councilman McNair, I know some of that we were trying to stick to the bond
Okay.
portion, but Mr. Colley, you all can get her those answers to her questions, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if they was, the persons to deal with that.
That would be something we would talk to Habitat about, yes, ma'am.
Okay,
We'll check in with them.
okay.
Thank you.
You are.
All right, Councilmember Gents, Benavente and Gents.
Mr. Cawley, looking at slide number 9, the down payment assistance bullet point, you said you're going to be expanding that by opening up the percentage
Yes, sir.
beyond the median. How much of the down payment assistance program was taken advantage of prior to that?
But we just launched that in July of this year. The city hasn't had one for about 10 years before that. And we've got 2 clients in the pipeline and 1 who's closed on a home.
And you used the example of law enforcement and as well as teachers. How would teachers specifically be able to do that, take advantage of the down payment assistance?
Because generally an entry-level police officer and teacher married with a kid would qualify in that 140% range.
I guess I'm asking, is it only city employees that can take advantage of the down
No,
payment?
sir.
It's opened up. All right.
Mhm.
Excellent. Thank you. Is that, as of now, it's been opened up to people outside of the employment of the city, or has that always been the case?
So that's 2 different programs. We've got our Good Neighbor program, which is an employee benefit, and then we have a program that right now is limited to 80% AMI, but in July we'll go up to 120 using these funds.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Gents.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to go back to what we were talking about with our bond and the affordable housing. So I guess what I wanted to make sure of is that we had talked about workforce housing, and I know we're circling back to it. So for the listening audience, so we're talking, let's say we're talking a teacher, works for the county, and he or she, first-time home buyer. What is the amount, the annual amount that they make that helps them qualify to become part of this grant program?
That'll be part of the market. I don't have that number right off because it depends on the household size.
So if I recall, and I might be wrong, but my understanding, it was anywhere from like under 48 to 52 thousand was kind of the sweet spot of it all. And I just want to kind of go on the record or, bring it to the attention that, we've worked very hard to have people come to work, live, and recreate here in Fayetteville. And we do have a housing shortage for the working population, and especially people 40 and under, it's hard. And I will tell you, being a representative of the North Carolina League of Municipalities, I will tell you, as Senator McGinnis told us the other day, people are coming here. They have found us out, and we need housing for people that are willing to come here and work and recreate and raise their family. So I just want to make sure that we're staying focused on that too, that we can't do all affordable housing, that we do need to have some housing in the bond. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sir, Member Hondros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just trying to figure out in my brain, to your point, you had mentioned about the funding going to multifamily versus single family, that we have more renters. We're making more renters instead of more homeowners, and how we can kind of bridge that. Mr. Cawley and Ms. Oliveira, Mr. Cawley, you mentioned that we have like a counseling for first-time home buyers, how to help them kind of get qualified, what steps they can take. And you mentioned, sometimes a car payment, because it's not just your income, it's other recurring expenses. So you want to get that mortgage first and then get that car payment later, because it's easier to qualify for. So I'm just thinking, once we get them in the program and they are a renter, connecting them with that counseling, because that would help them transition into the ownership. So I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm hoping that the public at large doesn't have to come and seek that counseling, that once they're renters, we automatically kind of enter them into that if they're willing to participate to that, hey, because the first thing, if you don't have a house, the first thing is finding a house, whether, you don't care if it's an apartment, whether you're renting or not. Once you have that, how can you transition into being a homeowner if that's what you desire? So I would just hope that once they get into the system, we kind of provide that to them if they're willing to participate.
And I guess I would be happy to kind of reframe this presentation to what the School of Government says cities are allowed to do in the housing arena, so that we can make sure we're taking advantage of the maximum amount. But at this time, everything we have on this slide, and including the framework that has proposed, is what cities do regarding housing in their communities, taking full advantage of all tools in North Carolina state law. Now, what bucket we fund to what level is absolutely the purview of City Council. And so, you know, right now I'm looking at if we can get 40 first-time home buyers in the next couple of years, that's a huge win for our community. If we run out of money, then we'll start draining a larger bucket of money to put into that one. And we're going to look at that on a quarterly basis moving forward.
Well, and I got.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I'm not saying that what you're doing is not legal, but what I'm saying is the communities that you're comparing this to that use this model, are they inverse with renters versus buyers like ours?
That's a national trend, yes, sir.
Yeah, so maybe not to the level of where our homeownership went down versus up. So as you retool this, when are you looking for council to kind of approve this? I mean, I would hope that there can be a consensus that maybe there could be an expansion in the home ownership efforts and a reduction into rental efforts. That's me personally, but if there's a consensus, maybe you can come back with a couple options. You know, we're not going to get there tonight, but when do you have to have a plan approved to submit to whoever, or to move forward, to start to put this into motion?
Yeah, so the difference in that decision point right there is whether I have $9 million available to negotiate with real estate developers or I don't. Right, and so that's just kind of where that is. We do have other resources currently, but yeah, if council would like to see us put $2 million in down payment assistance from the outset, we can absolutely do that. If y'all just tell us. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we still have. I think Benavente has spoken. Councilmember Banks McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, what are we using as far as like marketing tools to put out to the community? And that's both for the first-time home buyers and what was the other one for our employees?
The Good Neighbors.
The Good Neighbors.
So to put out to the community, right? So we use targeted Facebook ads. We've worked heavily with marketing and communications on pushing things out to. I see sometimes, city council members share stuff on Facebook, and so we're utilizing social media as much as we can in order to get those things out there. For the Good Neighbor, which is our internal city employee program, we've got posters up in all major break rooms and offices, things like that. And then we're going to, my boss asked me the other day if we can start presenting that at new employee orientation. And so we're going to start doing that as well. Even though they can't be eligible for a year, it still, it helps with retention and it helps them have a goal to work towards.
Good job. Also, do we have any, in the office, some information so that I can share with the community?
Yes, ma'am, we can certainly get you something.
Can you put some in my box? Okay, thank you.
All right. I think that's it. Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you, and thank you both of you. And I do like the piece where you added that that it will change, and so that prepares us to not be able to say, well, you said, but thank you for that piece. And I will add about the home ownership versus the renter piece. I do think there needs to be a balance. I am in the process of preparing to purchase my first home. Thank you. However, when it comes down to the property owners, I think that is the issue that we are running into with this city. So I would like to gather a consensus motion to accept all three bond reports: public safety, project roadmap, public infrastructure, and housing opportunity, to include more efforts for housing ownership. Thank
Second.
you.
All right, it's a motion by Councilmember Ingram, seconded by Councilmember Hondros. Discussion, Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Ingram, can we put something in there about the sidewalks with the schools to make sure, do we need to do that?
Well, I
No?
thought, I'll be very honest, I thought we gave direction, well, it's not a thought, we gave direction for that. So I'm not necessarily sure that we have to chew our food twice on this.
Well, we discussed it and it came back to us without it, so that's why I just wanted to make sure if
Manager
that's
Hewitt?
what.
Mr. Manager,
We don't
did you
need to, we don't have to, but.
hear the council's interest on sidewalks by school?
What was that again? Y'all want to
So
cover again?
a few weeks.
Yes, I heard.
Oh, okay. Oh.
I heard you. But yes, ma'am, to be clear, thank you for circling back on that. We do have that, and we will expand our efforts to look at all schools as a priority. We will do that.
Okay, so we don't need to put that in the motion?
No, ma'am. No,
Okay.
ma'am.
We
The
are-
main
like
one was
said.
just the housing piece that you're saying about more homeownership. Thank you.
All right, so it's a motion by Councilmember Ingram, seconded by Councilmember Hondros. Discussion has been had. Council, look to you for your votes. Good job, Mr. Colley. I know we dump a lot on your plate, so. All right, thank you. All right, motion carries 9-0, unanimous. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, and Council. Dave Steinmetz, Assistant Director for Development Services. We have a short presentation on dangerous buildings this evening. Dr. Newton had noticed that there were some questions sometimes when Mr. Planner, who you see on a regular basis, brings demolitions to you guys. And he asked Mr. Rutherford, who is the Code Enforcement Division Manager, to put together a brief presentation. So tonight we've got the subject matter experts here ready to give you guys some information.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. Jim Rutherford, Housing and Code Enforcement Division Manager, and with me I have Derek Planter, our Code Enforcement Supervisor. We wanted to bring some information to you regarding the Code Enforcement Division's demolition policy and process, or the process. It's probably a better way of putting it. A little bit of background. Since 2015, that's when our City Works system went into place. I went back and did a look. We did about 1,000 of these type of actions and cases. Every year we bring about an average of 23 to council, and we tear down about 15 buildings a year. We're doing 140 cases a year. We have 150 to 200, sometimes as many as 220 open at any one time. And you see there's 3 members of the team that do this. Mr. Planner does the majority of the heavy lifting with doing all the inspecting and all the paperwork and preparing stuff for council and managing the projects from the start to the finish, which you'll see here later on. That can be a fairly lengthy endeavor. And then, of course, our OA2, which is our office assistant. She does all the mailings and all that kind of stuff. You'll see later on that there's a bulk of other city departments and agencies that are involved in this process, and each one takes a matter of time to do what they need to do and move on. So dangerous buildings. How do we get to dangerous buildings? So most of them are due to fire damage. This is a house in Tiffany Pines, had a major fire. Sometimes they're vehicle strike. You might have noticed this one going up and down Ramsey Street. It's hit by a car that came right across the intersection. Trees and storm damage. A lot of times our structures are hit by objects and it causes damage to them. This is a house in off Rim Road. And then neglect and vandalism. This is a house off Winslow Street, I believe. You can see it's starting to fall apart. Having some structural issues, roofing issues. But getting to the other departments that, and other agencies, including the council, that kick in to get the job done. Code enforcement is the hub, bringing all the data, information, and all the processes together. And you can see there's a lot of people that have to come together to make a demolition happen. Typically, a demolition starts from detection, and from worst case scenario on the right of the arrow there, and starting off on the left is the best case scenario. Best case, the owner corrects the problem with the house or the structure before we even hold a hearing. Going through the process, sometimes we have to hold a hearing, then they correct it. Sometimes we have to bring it to council, and then they correct it. And then in the worst case, we go through the whole thing, take it to council, and then we still have to deal with it with a city-caused demolition. And from here, I'll let Mr. Planner kind of run through our current process. A lot of these are things that we have no control over extending, some we do, and later on you'll see that that's something we're asking for some input on.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Derek Planner, Code Enforcement Supervisor. I'll be covering the current steps in the dangerous building demolition process. And what this is going to do is outline the most case scenario, simple case scenario, the medium to the far extreme in the timeline. There are 47 items in the steps to do a city order demolition. This doesn't show the things that are not visible, as far as the current inspections, the communication with the owners, different things that go behind the scenes within these 47 steps. I will not go 47 steps verbatim, or in order. I'll be highlighting some of the ones that are the most time frame intensive. So Mr. Rutherford already covered what a dangerous building, how does it get there, as far as the vehicle strikes, weather, and things like that. So the first step that we do is actually inspect the property. And typically that takes about a day or 2 days to get that generated into the CityWorks case generation system. And then from there, you're looking at where the owner, or we expect the owner to bring their property into compliance. And that can average between 30 to 90 days itself. And then another time frame that we look at is actually requesting titles. That's a step that we have to do when this process begins, is actually requesting a title through real estate and waiting for that title to return before Mr. Rutherford actually holds a hearing on the property with the owner about the condition it's in. And then we're looking at the compliance date of that hearing order, that finding of facts issued to that property owner with a time frame of about 90 to 180 days. I'll be using examples as well that some of you might be familiar with. This property is the Strickland Bridge, Rayford Road project there on Applecross, right across from Circle K. I'm sure some of you have been by there lately and seen that it is no more, but I'll be using this property as an example how we go through these steps. So
wow.
These are some of the beginning photos of how we initiated that dangerous building and what it currently looked like. So that's your Rayford Road, Applecross. Mm-hmm. So next is the second portions of steps involved with the dangerous building process. And once again, I'm gonna highlight some of the most timely portions. Any type of repairs, and then if an owner of the property requested permits or pulled permits and got permits issued, that case gets extended for a 90-day period to allow the owner to do the repairs. Then after that, we'll start peppering the CCAM, the council action memo, which is a 15 to 60-day process to prepare and get all the documentation and everything packaged for council. In these following steps, there is a lot of outside agencies other than code enforcement involved, such as PwC, 911, zoning, ECD, to get information needed for the packet to bring before you. A little further down the line, council could offer to defer or pass on future effective dates. So if a property is run before council and the council chooses to allow more time or grant a stay or hold, that affects the timeline of completion of the demolition as well. So that's a factor that extends the timeline. and then, of course, the recording of the ordinance and adoption of generation mailed to the property owner. As you see right here, again, we're going to use the Applecross Rayford Road, the Strickland Bridge project right there is from Circle K. This is kind of the middle ground of what all those steps look like now. This is actually the demolition taking place and the actions of those steps to get that demolition taking place. And we'll cover the steps on how to get to this point in the next slide. So what we're looking at now is the steps to get to the previous slide and the actual beginning of the demolition. Of course, we have to do the asbestos testing and get the results back in order to be able to do the bid purchases and getting everything to contracting to get it routed and everything to get the contractor on board to do the job. So as you can see, a couple of those steps range from 30 to 60 days on its own, and then 60 to 90, and another 30 to 60 depending on the demolition contract and the routing and the approval and things like that. Then from that point, we're looking at the site inspection. That's a one-day thing. Me going out there saying, yep, we got everything in place with the contract, let the demolition begin. And then here we are with the portion of the contract that all the process of the final finished product is completed in the steps. Going back out there, inspecting the property, doing all the proper paperwork, which was included in the packet there, a complete packet. All that needs to be submitted to finance and to get a assessment and everything, a lien put on the property for the completed demolition. And then the final slide is a couple photos of that project near its completion and its completed demolition. As you can see, this one project right here, it's just shy of $70,000 to complete out of general fund, and our budget was actually $156,000. So it's an example of how one property could actually make a big difference and actually take a big hit on our general funds to complete this. So I just wanted to share pretty much a highlight of the 47 steps that takes to complete a demolition.
Okay. Part of what we wanted to bring to you is a comparison for our peer cities. We reached out to about half a dozen. We got responses from for Charlotte, Durham, Wilmington, and Raleigh. Of course, they all conduct demolitions. They generally wait about 2 months before they get cranked up on doing demolitions. On fire damage in Raleigh, they give them 6 months. An interesting stat is that the typical time to completion, it varies. Charlotte, you can see there up to 10 months, a year and a half for Durham, Wilmington, and this is not a typo, 1 to 10 years is what we were told. They said they don't take anything to council before 2 years. And then Raleigh, a year. If we have to go from start to finish through every one of those steps, and the owner, depending on extensions or hearing order times, or if they're showing any good faith or they lose good faith, we're typically around 13 months from start to finish of a demo. None have dedicated staff. Cases per year, Charlotte, they do 120 dangerous building cases that they have orders on. Durham takes 6 to 8 to council a year, 5 to 10 for Wilmington, and Raleigh says they do about 12 to 24. And they said they have a lot of investor activity in Raleigh, so there's very few available properties that don't get scooped up and rehabbed or tore down by the owners. They all allow additional time for repairs, and you can see the demo budgets there ranging from $250,000 down to $80,000. We look at some opportunities and impacts, ways that could potentially shorten the process, starting it immediately without any extensions, advertising all the hearings right off the bat. That's a process that's necessary if we don't have confirmed service on owners. So typically, we would send it out in order to save the city money, see if we get service. If we don't get service, then we'll have to advertise in the paper of record. That's required by general statute. That is very expensive. Some of those ads are $200 to $300 a piece. So that's an opportunity. It would save time up front, maybe not having to re-advertise, but sometimes you'd have to wait. Limiting compliance times, the statute requires a minimum of 60 days. We go up to 180. If we limited that just to 60, we could save some time, but we'd also have a lot of pushback and a lot of appeals, more than likely. Stopping extensions, even if repair activities are in process. That's when we have some examples where we have hearing orders and they've gone past it, but they have permits in place, and we're trying to work with the owners. That's our main thing, is we're trying to always work with the owner to get the results, get the property in compliance, and not spend the city's taxpayer money. Council accepts consent items or more meetings. We only come to you once a month, and you only do it 10 out of the 12 months. So there is some gaps there that cause extensions and delays. And then filing lis pendens at the beginning of the process. Sometimes that is a legal maneuver that is required to be done. But if we do it early on, it's an expense, and it also kind of puts a stranglehold on the property as far as financing and getting things like that. And that's all we have for you. We'll entertain any questions you might have.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to go over a few things. So what I'm seeing right here, it says code enforcement brings an average of 23 properties to city council each year for demolition ordinance.
Correct.
Code enforcement demolishes an average of 15 buildings per year.
Yes.
This is where it gets interesting to me. And I can call a spade, I can look at myself in the mirror and know where I have made decisions that probably made your job very hard. Average of 140 new cases per year, with 150 to 170 open at any time.
Correct.
So what I'm seeing is it keeps adding and adding and adding. So I would say that I am more in favor of supporting to make the process go faster, and maybe not having to come to us so much, because when I am at fault, like I said, I can look at myself in the mirror and say I didn't make the right decision. The one time that I did call up and say, y'all did everything you were supposed to do. They called up and said, I've had this, I've had that. I promise you I'm going to get it. It's going to be better. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to put windows in it. That was 3 years ago. And it still looks the same. And I blame me for that, for going up to bat for the situation. But now as I'm reading through this, and I was reading through this, I get it. Because if we don't hit it when it comes to us, it probably goes back down where the other 140 are. So we're, again, on the hamster wheel of, and I know it has been what you're saying to me, it's almost a year that you were talking to the owners, trying to work with them and get it right. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's knowledge, that you are trying to work with them.
Always, yes.
And I understand that. And we
rather
have,
they do it, yes.
yes, we would rather them fix their place up, and now we have ways for them to go to find money. But us as a council, if we put it and give them more time, it's just going to the 140 that keep coming.
And we've jumped economic community development in early in the game. We've changed that up, and actually we've retooled a process for buildings damaged by fire. It's a kind of an internal policy to get them on board right when the building is posted, so that they can have access to those resources. They can go to economic community development and say, hey, I didn't have insurance, I don't have insurance. What can you do to help me out? That kind of thing.
So they can go there. And I guess the one thing that is that I'm having issues with is homes that are getting foreclosed on. and people are coming in, squatters are coming in and living in these houses. And by the time that we can get there for ordinance, it keeps on moving and moving and moving. So there's more to it than just what's in here, and thank you for doing the job y'all are doing.
You're welcome.
Ma'am, if I can add, also with those numbers, if you're looking at those numbers, they keep hamster wheeling because things keep happening. We average about just over the weekend about 6 fires within the Fayetteville limits. So that's just one weekend. So that vehicle strikes, the number, the conditions or the casualties to structures doesn't change. I mean, it just
Correct.
keeps adding. And then right now we're saying there are 23 properties to council each year. Right now we're on path to bring 80.
Right.
So it's growing.
And for the listening audience and for the council to see, you see the bigger cities that are moving and growing are having more of, and I hate to say, the demolitions going on because they're just moving so fast and expanding.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Before I go to Councilman Hondros, I did have a couple questions. So who determines whether a structure is uninhabitable and ready for demolition or not? Is it that it's vacant and it is become a nuisance or gathering for vagrants? Or is it unsafe, like at the end of a fire? Is that discretion given to the code enforcement, or is that a licensed contractor looking at it? How does that work?
No, it's code enforcement staff. I'm a level 1 building inspector. I review all the cases that come to us, and we meet on them often to review the totality of what we had there. Is this a substandard house? You know, needs some paint, a cracked window here or there, or is this a dangerous building? A dangerous building is something that would be compromised, the walls, the roof system, flooring systems, electrical systems. It's been flooded and it's contaminated. There's a lot of small things that can make a building dangerous. And then you also have blighted buildings, which are buildings that are vacant. They have substandard conditions, and they're in one of the city's redevelopment areas that council approved. I think it's probably been 6 or 7 years ago now, but it's a small portion of the area. Typically, it's the downtown B Street area, Murchison Corridor, a lot of that, Bonnie Doon. Those are all blighted areas. So if there's a vacant house there and it does have some substandard conditions, and it is vacant, we can take it to council as blight. Otherwise, it has to be dangerous. It has to have dangerous conditions.
That's kind of where I was going without going there. So if this is in a targeted redevelopment area, there's a little less leeway given, or you have a different process that you could use to expedite the process than in a non-redevelopment area.
It's the same process. It just, we take a building that has just a little bit wrong with it in a blighted area and take action on it, versus if it's in a, you know, let's just say it's in a middle income neighborhood, not in the blight area, we would only be able to go substandard on it.
So doesn't that accelerate gentrification? If you got a house that you accelerate a demolition because of paint in one thing that would ordinarily not prompt that expedited process if it were in a non-redevelopment area?
No, one of the things that this is probably a great conversation too, that we need to probably come back with Chris Cawley and others about. When you actually look at the authority that you have in these areas, Dr. Newton came in and we actually tried to move it around to different areas to have some impact on some of these areas. It would probably be very helpful for us to have a workshop with you where you actually articulate your goals. You did some of that at the retreat. You said you wanted more home ownership. One of the other things, though, that we've also intuited from what council has said, and the staff has it as well, is that generational wealth is largely passed on through real estate. And so when we tear down a house, we're tearing down just more than a blighted or dilapidated structure. Once it's gone, it's gone. But by the same token, and we've all seen this as well, 1 or 2 bad houses in a neighborhood can completely discourage other investors or even homeowners from coming in and making those changes. And so it's a very careful balancing act, which I'm so glad that that's why it comes before the city council. You guys are the ones that have to okay us to do that. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But that's also why we have the session tonight. But the council and the staff is very, very aware that when we take down a house that is air property or generational, and even when we have a burned house, and you and I have had this discussion, where we try to make sure that the homeowner is able to tear down the house because they don't want to lien on it. If there's a lien that's placed on it, then that becomes an extra burden, even if it's $7,000 that someone may not have. And so I think what we were really trying to show tonight, and I'm going to stop in just a minute because it is getting late, but when you look at the volume of cases that we do, Wilmington, one of the reasons they take so few cases, I worked there for a while, is that they view a lot of their homes as historic. And they have a lot of fabric in their neighborhood, and they don't want to demolish them. But what we've got to have, and we talked about it earlier with Chris Cawley too, is investment. And sometimes people are very reluctant to invest if there's a lot of blight and dereliction. But again, the fail-safe here is that these have to come before council. You pick the redevelopment areas. You also pick the homes that are demolished. So that gives me some comfort that we're hitting it right.
All right, and last thing I have, to me, it's a difference. Maybe it can be tightened up the time frame between a fire damaged structure or some type of damage that is non-habitable and dangerous. The amount of time, because there have been some fire structures that I've seen stick around for a while, that you worry about kids or other people getting in there and something falling on them and somebody getting hurt. Is there a direct connection between when the fire department responds, we get a report every time that tells about level of damage, if anyone was injured, so forth. Is there a connection or communication between that process and your office that the clock starts ticking? Because typically insurance claims will be wrapped up within, 6-7 months unless there's some extenuating circumstances that prolongs it. But after that, there are 2 or 3 houses on Jasper Street that have been there for a while. There's one on Murchison across from University that's been there for a while, damaged. And what's the timeline or the connectivity between that? And that's my last question.
Okay, so typically with fires, the insurance companies and if they're repairable, it is an endeavor that most homeowners would never wish on anybody to have to deal with fixing a fire damaged house. We have the first example I showed you, this house here. This property owner, I talked to her the other day, has been fighting with the insurance company since October, and they still have not issued a single payment on her claim. So, and that's just to get money to fund what she wants to do. What she wants to demo the building and then rebuild. But we make every effort to work with the property owners, and if they're showing good faith and communication, we allow that to go on. As far as if it's unrepairable, yeah, you could expect that we would work them to go with a shorter hearing order and try and get it down as fast as possible. As far as the Jasper properties you asked about, those are been tied up in foreclosure, bankruptcy hearings, and we only got a hearing or a notification from real estate, I think, a week or two, last week. Okay, last week about.
It's pending a sale now.
It's pending a sale, so it's extended the hearing on their end, and while that ownership is in challenge, we don't know who the owner is, so we can't hold a legitimate hearing and a hearing order. The one on Murchison is being bought by a new property owner, actually, so we'll have to start over on him.
Well, okay. All right, thank you. Councilman Hondros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 2, I think it was, there was some Pierce City budgets for demolishing dangerous structures. Does the city of Fayetteville have a line item budget? What's our budget?
156.
156. Okay, thank you.
I want to add, sir, that Charlotte has a budget of $250,000. They do 120 cases a year. Our budget is 156,000. We do average of 140 a year. So it's just us three. So there's a little bit of difference in that comparison of the budget and the size of the city as well. So.
All right, thank you. All right,
Thank
do you
you,
need any action from us? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, moving to item 5.07 is the sales tax.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for item 5.07.
All right, there's a motion by Councilmember Ingram to suspend the rules for item 5.07, seconded by Councilmember Hondros. Discussion on that motion. Council, I'll look to you for your votes on that. Yeah. Then we got- All right, motion carried 9-0. Council, moving to item 5.07, the consideration for the sales tax agreement. You know, you're very familiar with this. It is up for renewal. The other municipalities are taking action before the next meeting. This proposal was actually sent to us by the county for consideration to extend it until year July 1 of 2025. Is that right, Mr. Manager? All right. And then after that, it would change the formula, and we've discussed the impacts of that, but at least that gives us a little time to plan for budgeting. So any questions or comments on that? Yes, sir. All right, there's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem to accept the proposed agreement. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember McNair. Any discussion on the motion? All right, council, I'll look to you for your votes. All right, motion carries 9-0. So, Mr. Manager, we'll get that to Commissioner Chairwoman Stewart as soon as we can. Item 5.08, council member requests. Madam Clerk, if you could set the clock for 5 minutes. This is a council member request by Councilmember Thompson. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, my request is for us to try to change the election charter for the city of Fayetteville. The proposal is for a 4-year staggered terms, 2 years for the mayor. Tonight, with your support, I'd like to take this adoption to a public hearing at the next available public hearing. With 4-year terms, we can be more strategic in our long-term planning. You know, we all talk about continuity, collaboration, connectivity, cohesiveness, consistency with leadership, and with regionalization and development incentives with our neighboring municipalities. This is the start of the process in moving this city forward. A lot of people ask me, why now? Well, why not now? If not us, then who? You know, this has been tried before, in case you asked. It's been tried in 2016. It's been tried again in 2018. I brought it up in October as soon as I came on the council because we can't keep doing business as usual. Other cities are doing it, and we need to move in the direction of other cities. Here's some examples for you. Greensboro, Cary, Concord, High Point, Winston-Salem, Wilmington, and possibly Hope Mills tonight, and our county commissions, who, trust me, we need to collaborate more a lot. We run the risk of having a new board every election cycle, including the mayor. This will cause havoc for a city this size if that was to happen. A lot of cliches that I have been told since I've been here is you're getting fed through a fire hose, or you don't know what you don't know, or we're going to circle the hamster wheel. These are the things that we hear all day long. But if we don't adhere to what we're hearing, then we're just going to keep repeating what's been repeated when everybody on council know that 4-year staggered terms is the way to go. So this is my ask. Not that you listen to me, but you listen to your constituents. And when you hear from your constituents, let's educate them on what you know is best for the entire city. Don't get it from me, get it from your constituents and educate them. If it's in your heart and you feel it's the right thing to do, then let's do it. This will be a resolution of intent asking staff to bring back a good, better, and best scenario to our ordinance amendments we can agree on after the public hearing. So, Mr. Mayor, before I make a motion, I'd like to answer any questions any of my fellow councilmen have.
Thank you, sir. Council, any questions?
Yes, as I'm understanding, you're asking us to have a public forum to hear, and then from that, we'll move forward.
Exactly.
Public hearing, right? Okay.
Yeah, public hearing, my
Public hearing.
apologies.
All right. And so I've got the hamster wheel thing going on my iPad. So, so question for you, the staggered terms, what would it be, even and odd? So 1 year, kind of like the county commission, they have District 1 run and then District 2 run, so and then 2 at large, or how does that proposal?
Mr. Mayor, I can tell you that there will be several scenarios that we can all have input on after we have the public
Gotcha.
hearing. But the steps of making this happen is to have the public hearing first.
Gotcha.
Everybody will have an input on how we move forward.
So this basically is just a consensus to bring this to the public to
Correct, Mr.
hear
Mayor.
comments. All right, any questions on that? Councilmember Hondros?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My main question would be, this is for a future term and not for our existing term, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Benavente?
Mr. Thompson, the last time this was attempted, it went to a referendum, and the votes came out no. If during the public hearing, the majority say no, will you adhere to that no?
Majority of who?
The people who come to the public hearing.
Let me explain about a public hearing. I've been asked this question 3 times before. I could bombard this courtroom with about 100 people in favor of it, but they will only be speaking on District 6 and not the entire city. And I'm pretty sure other council members can do the same thing. So I would ask you, as you have asked earlier, to go to your community watch meetings, to go to your Facebook page, to go to your media outlets, and put the idea out there and hear from your constituents, and let them be your voice when you make your decision.
So is there a reason why you don't want to put it to a referendum?
Because we don't have to.
All right, so if I hear it correct, tonight would be just consensus to see if you bring this for a public hearing.
Correct.
So no other commitment than that, right?
Correct.
If that's what you're asking.
That's what I'm asking.
Mr. Mayor,
All right.
I do want to clarify so that I'm clear as well. There is a specific statutory process that starts with the resolution of intent. So assuming the vote passed, is it to start that process, which begins with the adoption of the resolution of intent, or are you simply interested in having a public hearing before you start the formal process?
So, good question. So it's posed. So now there are steps that if there is support for the council to do it, start with a resolution. But Madam Attorney, nothing stops us from hearing from the public on a specific item, does it?
Well,
Right, and that's what I'm asking, because the resolution of the statutory process requires a public hearing. So I'm just asking,
I know
you
that's,
beginning-
I don't think that's what he's asking tonight, because I don't know that council is in support of that. I think what he's asking is that you have the hearing, but Mr. Thompson, you can speak for
yes,
yourself.
I was going to say, let me answer, Mr. Mayor, because I want to make sure I have it correct. I believe that the process of us to have a hearing first, and then after the hearing, we will have a resolution of intent to move forward from the public hearing. Am I correct, Madam Attorney?
you could certainly do that, but once you adopt that resolution of intent, you still have to have a public hearing.
Gotcha.
So in essence, you would be having 2 public
Well,
hearings.
let's have the resolution of intent first before we have the public hearing. So we don't have to have 2 public hearings.
So your question tonight is for a resolution of
A
intent.
resolution of intent to have a public hearing.
So the direction tonight would be to direct the city attorney to develop a resolution of intent.
It comes back to council
That
for
comes-
official vote, right?
That's correct.
Thank you, Madam Attorney.
All right, so if there's enough support, you had a question, Councilmember
I
Jensen?
did. So what I'm hearing is the resolution of intent is there is an intent for us to change the, from 2 years to 4 years, and then have the public hearing, and then we go from there. Am I completely off, or is that right?
So the direction would be to adopt a resolution of intent, which begins the process for consideration
Okay.
of changing from 2 to 4 years.
Okay.
So
I just want to make sure that I understood that. And I want to say that because I've probably sat in this chair so long that I've gone through this twice, and it has gone to a referendum, and I know what my district has told me over and over again, so I'm not going to be able to support this, but thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. There's a consensus ask on the floor to support a resolution that will come back to council for formal action and a vote. Those in favor, show iPads. My iPad is still hamster wheeling, yeah. All right, so show of hands, those in favor of the support to bring back a resolution to a formal council meeting, which will then take action. All right, those opposed, Councilman Benavente and Jensen. Okay, all right, so consensus carries. So they'll bring back a resolution at some point, Madam Attorney, for consideration for council. Item 5.09, Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have put a council member request in with my committee, the Corridors Committee, which consists of Councilmember McNair and Councilmember Benavente. So what we are asking for this is what we have figured out. We're trying to combat the litter situation and the illegal dumping and things like that to clean up our corridors and things like that. But what we realized is, I guess I'm gonna use another metaphor. We have a big elephant in the room, and we talk about litter, litter, litter. And what we are asking as a committee is as we can work with staff and say, what is litter and what is illegal dumping and what is things coming off of trucks, what is homelessness encampments that we are cleaning up. So when we say we're working on litter, it's not everything in the city, and we can't go after it until we know what's ahead of us, and if we can kind of categorize it in certain areas. Now, when we ask for the committee to also use request information, when we get it to say, this is what we want to be litter, this is what we consider to be trash coming off trucks, this is homelessness encampment, and this is illegal dumping. It's nothing that we don't want to do that we're not showing the whole council. It's just we were just asking if we could kind of separate it, but we can bring it back to council too. But that's all we're looking to do is solve the issues ahead of us.
So just to make sure I'm clear, you're asking for consensus for the committee to come up with a designation for the types of litter?
Yeah, so we can learn how to figure out how to combat it, because we have
address each issue.
each individual issue, because what we're finding now is it's like people will call in and say, we have litter on Rayford Road. Well, it's not litter, it's illegal dumping, and if we go out there, it might be a couch.
Okay.
You know, so kind of an education and trying to just figure out everything in
And
slot.
the last sentence that you had on there was about allow the committee to make the decision. So, you can't do any formal action on the committee.
No, and it was worded wrong, and I thoroughly apologize for that. What we're basically saying is, can we say that litter is somebody throwing a napkin out, but we can bring that back. It was
So the
just
committee will work through the nuts and bolts of the details of it. and
correct.
come back if any actions needed.
Absolutely, and I don't know if everybody has realized we have put out our minutes so people can see what we're talking about.
All right, Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I recognize that city managers, I guess, may be already approving this, but Mr. Redding, excuse me? Mr. Redding, and I might not be able to support this because I can count over probably 10 times we've had this conversation in my one term of being here, where we've had council members submit council member requests. We've purchased illegal dumping cameras. We've set up with the partnership with the county 5 for Friday. We do the cleanups. So, but more so going into the illegal dumping and then also the litter conversations that we've had in the past. What's different from what's being asked? Because based off of the information that you've submitted to us in the past, we have these answers in my perspective. So I don't want to double, I'm going to ask him, I don't want to double work the staff when they've already been submitting this stuff to us.
Okay, so what I will say to you, Mr. Redding was not in our meeting. This was asked by staff that we bring this up.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Mr. Redding again, what is missing from what you all have done? I'm not, based off of what I've seen, I have a clear understanding of what the differences are. So I don't understand what the difference is. I do know the illegal dumping cameras are working. Please, can you give me some?
Yes, ma'am. So the city has done a ton of different efforts in sustainability, more focused on litter, illegal dumping, everything we talked about. But I think what Councilmember Jensen is speaking to is the newly established committee wanting to really chew on the issue and see what other options we have to go after that problem.
What newly established committee?
Well, the committee that Ms. Jensen's speaking to.
It's the same committee, she's just the new chair of it, Corridors Committee, correct?
Yes. I won't be supporting this.
All right, any other comments, questions? All right, the time is up, so council, I look to you for your votes. Think iPads are still spinning. All right, show of hands, those in support. All right, those opposed? All right, so motion carries, so it'll come back with information, and I guess the committee will determine strategies to address each individual part of it. Council 2, and Madam Chair of the committee, I may come to you. We have a sustainable plan that's outdated by 12, 13 years, and we need to update that, so I'll be submitting a separate request for that. But as a part of that, we also have a ordinance that we're not enforcing from 2011 for multifamily, requiring recycling and some other stuff. So I would like your committee to find out how much of this trash comes from overflowing trash at dumpsters or multifamily.
And that's part of the request, and we have Sustainable Sandhills coming to us next meeting.
Right.
So-
Okay, thank you. You know, they put one up outside my house, but, you know,
So
I
I
didn't really
can-
have a littering problem over there, but I haven't seen any.
I can answer that question if you would like. So
And they're
we,
white instead of yellow. So.
we have started putting the no litter signs up. We have put them on all the city-owned streets that we are allowed to. My neighborhood, there's one going into my neighborhood, and I was like, why is it going into my neighborhood? And it's because they're DOD streets that we cannot put signs on. But we had a meeting, our committee today had a meeting with DOT. They gave us a list, you will get that in your email, of the signs that we are going to be able to put on DOD property, that we're asking for that. And we have also put the city signs up for panhandling. And we are asking for a request with DOT on that too. So more to come.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to kind of belabor this, but I do have a question of staff about the signs, because the mayor just said he's seen signs near his community.
No, outside my yard. I don't really have a litter problem outside my
No,
yard,
but
but I guess
I'm
I've
getting
asked
to-
about it so many
Right.
times.
Oh,
I wanted to
okay.
make sure that I saw the sign.
Okay, well, and then Councilmember Jensen stated she is now seeing them near her community. I live amongst a very blighted community, especially where it's in terms of littering, and I haven't seen any signage. So is this one of those things where you see crime activity happening in the community and it's normally not a thing, and so you say, well, let's put it there first so it won't become a normal thing versus in putting it in communities where we know it's an issue? Is that what? Because District 2 has a lot of littering issues.
So I can answer that question.
So what we'll do, because we're on the council member request part now, great question, but Mr. Manager, if you can address that to where those signs are located outside.
I can address
It's
or
okay, never
Councilmember
mind.
Jensen. But I need to be fair to the other council members who've got their request on here. All right, so moving to item 5.010, Councilmember McNair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Request one.
All right, Councilmember McNair has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You done? Okay. I have a proposal to make an ordinance which would require anyone in Fayetteville that has a firearm in their vehicles to have the firearms secured in their vehicles. I have 5 minutes here, so I'm going to read along here. The largest source of stolen guns is from car theft, and cities that report crime data to the FBI, including Fayetteville, on average, at least one gun is stolen from a car every 15 minutes. Cars parked at residences, driveways, outside homes, etc., are the most common source of stolen guns, demonstrating the most important securely stolen guns at all times and locations. And law enforcement officials speculate that a combination of unlocked cars and increasing numbers of young people engaging in this particular type crime may be relevant. Cities located in the state with particular weak gun laws, like North Carolina, are associated with greater rates of gun theft from cars. My goal is employing a vehicle gun storage ordinance will help ensure that fewer legally possessed firearms ends up being used unintentionally to harm children or to be stolen and used in future violent crimes. Fayetteville ordinance for the public health and welfare requiring unattended firearms in motor vehicles to be stored in a locked condition, requiring stolen guns to be reported to the Fayetteville Police Department to establish that a rebuttal presumption exists that a firearm in a vehicle is the property of the driver in said vehicle, and containing a saving clause and severability clause and emergency clause. Also, I want to make note of that there was House Bill 53 that was voted on by state representatives, Charles Smith, Francis Jackson, and Marvin Lucas, that was voted on and it was not passed. And so I'm asking if we would take a look at this and get our city staff and our attorney to take a look at this, and possibly if we could get a vote to take a census to take this to one of our regular meetings, our city council meetings, so that we can try to get this passed, if I said it correct.
Okay.
Questions?
Is it okay?
All right, it's Councilman Bingham.
And I was trying to track, what is the direct acts? Yeah, what's the direct acts? Or let me ask you, let me ask you what I think the direct acts is. You want us to take this bill to our next council meeting and vote on it?
No, after asking the city staff and our attorney to do some research on it.
Okay,
And
you're
after the
asking our city staff to research preventative measures to slow up car theft?
No, ma'am.
Gun theft in cars.
Yeah.
I think it's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance to hold people
So
accountable.
you would
Gotcha.
increase a penalty or implement a
Okay.
penalty.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Madam Attorney, technically somebody is a victim if their car is being broken into, but at the same time, if it's related to it, it's okay, never mind.
All right,
I had a conversation with the DA and about that a concern that you have, and actually it was mentioned that a second-class misdemeanor, which will actually fine the gun owner.
So, Councilman McNair, thank you for that clarification. But you said you spoke to the DA. It's already a crime for not securing a firearm, isn't it? So does the DA make those charges for people who?
If they're stolen out of a vehicle and then there's a
He
crime
already
committed.
does that?
No.
Okay. All right, Councilman Mayor Pro Tem Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councilmember McNair, you probably want staff to look at other cities and maybe bring back some information that might. I got 1 second. Thank you, Clerk McGill. If we could see where it's working in other cities, I mean, if it's making a difference, I can support. I'll support your consensus ask to at least get more information to see if it's making a difference. The FBI says it makes a difference, but I'd like to see where it's working in other cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Any questions, comments, Council? Councilmember Hondros?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Mayor Pro Tem's point, I think they should be other peer cities of the state of North Carolina, so we share the same state constitution.
All right. Council, look to you for your votes for support of this ask. Those in favor? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Motion carries. So, Madam Attorney will bring back information for research, and we'll move forward. All right, item 5.011, Councilmember Benavente.
Thank you, Mayor Coleman. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Benavente, I'm just kidding.
No, it's good. That was great. My ask today is for City Council to consider additional support and resources for ultimately the 3-mile radius that we identified to place shot spotter microphones. We know that this 3-mile radius is very particular and therefore ripe for gun violence, which is why it'll eventually be selected. Rather than waiting simply for the next incident of gun violence to occur, I believe that we need to take proactive steps as well to ensure that this community is receiving appropriate resources. It's not the entire 3-mile radius. Rather, there are certain hot spots within that 3 miles that I've seen in drafts. And every single one of those hot spots could have different needs, different neighborhoods, different blocks. It's not for me to assume what those needs are, but I want the first step to be for staff to go and investigate exactly what we can do to help better support that community. It may be assistance with keeping a roof over their heads, getting their children into after-school programs, getting jobs for folks. Whatever it is, there's something unique about this 3-mile radius that we're saying is making it potential for harm. So rather than just simply waiting for that harm to occur, we can do more to support the individuals there. I know that I've spoken about this with the city manager, and Assistant City Manager Yates, and Chief Brayton as well. And the police are going to be great at identifying where there are problems, but they aren't necessarily going to be the ones to be able to have the solutions. There's ways that we can incorporate different community organizations to support that area, so there may not be any need for additional costs. We certainly already have the Prove Project folks that go out and do interpersonal violence interruption, and they would certainly have the training to go out and do some of that surveying. So I just want to make sure that we're not simply identifying this area as very likely to be the next place that we have gun violence occur and just waiting for that to happen, and that we instead take some proactive action to support that area as well.
So I did have a question, Councilmember.
Yes, sir.
So basically, if I understand, the shot spotter recommendation will come to areas that have had the highest episodes of gun violence, right? So this really didn't have anything to do with shot spotter per se. This is just areas of the city that have the highest gun violence. So if we could extract that, I probably could get behind it, because I don't want to open up the whole shot spotter conversation again. But I guess what I'm saying is that the programs we have and the partners who are in the community who are dealing with proactive related services, Mr. Hewitt, the program that Kevin Brooks have and some of the interrupters that we stood up, don't they target areas of need, or how what's their marching orders?
Yes, sir, they do, but some of that is also directed specifically at the people who are involved or who would be victims of it. I don't know if this is a broader effort to look at the community than just specifically the folks that Mr. Brooks and the Proof Project would talk to and interact with on a
well, I mean, I just named him for example because
sir.
That's an internal partner, but any organization that helps with high-risk youth, I support that. But what I'm saying is, don't they typically target areas that need it?
Yes, sir.
And I think the big difference here, sir, is that this 3-mile radius is going to be something that we've said out of all the areas of our entire city that have issues with gun violence, there's something unique about this one. And if it's going to be uniquely that in a way that says, hey, there could be harm there, we need to send additional resources there specifically as well. And not simply the reactive kind, not reactive, but rather Mr. Brooks jumps in there when he hears something going on. I want to get in there before that.
The social economic piece, okay. Alejandro.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Benevitti, so you're proposing us trying to provide programs that are being proactive instead of reactive, right?
Yes.
Just for clarification on my part, so is the shot spotter, is it going to be 1 3-mile radius or 3 1-mile radius?
We are looking at it as being 3 1-mile areas instead of one large contiguous area, based upon the map and the data where we're having the greatest amount of violent crime.
For what it's worth, Mayor Colvin, I'm not exactly saying how this has to be done. I would like staff to come back and say, hey, these are the 3 1-mile radius or radii that we've identified, and we can also send some folks to find out what some of the needs are that are making it so ripe for violence.
Okay, Councilman Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Benevitti, if I could try to reframe this in somewhat the same conversation, but in maybe in a different approach. At the helm of the chief and our city manager, would you be open to, in preparation for the deployment of ShotSpotter, allowing chief to set up some form of a community committee with Proof Project, TOSA Initiative, other partners? Even when we were talking about the mini grants, we have like some schools, safety coordinators that maybe could sit in on this. So that way, while we're catching this information in real time, or even ahead of real time, like you said, we've eyeballed and said, okay, this is an issue. Why is it an issue? We have these partners on this committee that can go ahead and begin that work to expense out the opportunities that they have, and even maybe Greater Fayetteville, because those entities that I named, we already fund in a great capacity. And so I would like...
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
I just want our city staff to come back to us with exactly what that
We're
is.
close to 5 minutes, so we get the last questions answered. You said got city staff to say something?
No, I'm saying to answer Councilmember Ingram's question, the short answer is yes, but whatever, the request is for city staff to come back with a presentation on what exactly that looks like.
So just the last question I have, just to make sure I'm clear. So let's say the problem area in an area is a store, right? And you're saying it's a 1-mile circumference, right? But it's placed in and around store, and the most calls for service for violence are store. How do you know that the people outside of the 1 mile from the store don't need those proactive services? Like, I think tying it, I understand going to the hot spots of the city, I support that. Tying it to ShotSpotter's noise, I didn't see how those two things are connected.
Just because the chief of police and others who are identifying where the hot spot is, there's something about that area. And it might be just like you said, sir, that they go and they survey the area and they find out, well, it's more about something else. And then we have that answer. And at which point we don't necessarily have to do anything with that 1 mile.
Gotcha. All right. Councilmember Jensen.
Real quick, so what I'm hearing from you is basically, and we're going to take, these are the areas that we need to look at, that the police are looking at. They can bring us data, and we just need to really have staff put the resources in. I mean, to make it in a nutshell, we know those are the places we need to be looking at. We need to work with the police to say, what can we do to make it better and get our partners to help us?
Correct.
Okay.
So before we take the vote, did you bring, how's this related to the, did you receive consensus for the larger comprehensive study for violence that we haven't had time to bring back? Wouldn't it include some of this stuff that you're asking? You remember, didn't you send a comparison?
That was related to gun violence, sir. I'm thinking in this situation, we're talking about something more targeted.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Ingram, then we'll...
Councilmember Benevitti, if I may.
Right.
For me to feel comfortable supporting this, And because what I'm in the space of is I don't want to have to keep going and doing any back and forth with the staff. We are funding organizations at a great capacity already. I think we should say, get these individuals, get them with the chief and their team.
That's why I said yes, Councilman Ringer. I expect all the ones that we fund to be a part of resourcing those communities.
Well, can you put that in the form of a consensus? So
Yes.
all we know that so basically what needs to happen when they come back says, this is who we have, this is what we're doing.
That's my expectation of staff to do. That is just sort of the most obvious thing they could do. So I expected that to be their solution. But I want to leave it up to staff to tell me that.
No, we're giving them the direction of what we want them to do.
I would like
So I have to bring the discussion to an end.
Yes.
All right, so this is for
Yes.
consensus for support as stated. So those in favor? Stated was, the request that's before us is for, to send in proactive strategies and organizations to the radius determined by staff with shot spotter criteria. All right, show of hands, those in favor of that? All right, motion carries. All right.
Mr. Mayor, point of personal privilege before we
Two
adjourn.
quick announcements that were forgot in the front. These are important for people that have passed away, or one has.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, and you'll do the other one, who is a former mayor pro tem. I imagine a lot of folks know by now, but from the class of 1954 at Fayetteville High School, Jerry Richardson passed away today. And Jerry played ball here in Fayetteville, and then he went on to Wofford, where he was a star, and then he was drafted by the Baltimore Colts. And he played in what's considered to be, and you can Google this, the world's greatest football game of all time, which was between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Football Giants. So, and Jerry Richardson caught the winning pass in what's considered to be the greatest football game ever played. So, rest in peace, Mr. Richardson. And he was the first NFL player to own a National Football League football team. So, a native of Fayetteville, right here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And then finally, more of a celebratory announcement. Happy birthday, 90th birthday to former council member Aaron Johnson, Pastor Johnson from Mount Sinai Church, or Pastor Emeritus. So Jamel, have a special day with your dad. Happy birthday, sir. All right. Council motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Have a good evening.